Gloria? I can't hear.
Nicolas, are we live?
Yes, now, yes.
Okay. So thank you very much indeed for being here, to all of you, both speaker and people following on YouTube. It's an important morning for us. Is this Soil Health Networking Day, as is written here, join forces for this big topic. So as you will see, we will start now in the my welcome note, but then we shall hear from yes, the policy officer by European Commission, Marta Iglesias, and then Luca Montanarella, that will give both the perspective, different perspective from a European Union viewpoint, European Commission viewpoint. Then we, as you can see, we will have a tour de table, then a series of speeches, not long, and lots of time on discussion. So do not worry if maybe the time we will, yes, we will allow some firing question after each of the presentations, starting from the one of Marta, because we, as you could see, we have 80 minutes for discussion. So we could bit use also a few minutes from those in case we need to, yes, to interact with the speakers. So the interaction can be live for those on Zoom, or can be on the chat by that Gloria will let us know if there are specific questions. So I start really my presentation, and I put just some slides for these few minutes. And so I think I will start just highlighting some basics. So the first things that we are all know that in last year there have been dispute about whether we should or should not use the term soil health. And actually this is not completely new, especially in soil science. We remember in the 70s, the FAO, the discussion about soil quality, land quality, even before and also after FAO established the definition, for instance, of land quality. I would agree with this paper just this year by Janssen, basically saying as long as soil health help unearth better ways of knowing and sustaining land, let's use it. We have still time to redefine them. I would also like to add that what I especially like about soil health, that to my viewpoint, words are important. And this can be an help, of course, just an additional help, but can be also great in our joint effort to overcome the huge divide between us, scientists, experts, and citizens. So this is very, of course, is an opportunity. But we have something new. It's very important that European Union policy is giving us a clear direction now. It's really leading in the world in terms of really putting so much energy on soil. And of course, I have to quote the European Union Soil Strategy, we shall hear from a moment from Luca and Marta, and which just came a few days ago. If you look for the term health, you end up with the 100 results. 6 of those refer to human health, all the rest basically refers to soil health. So obviously, even from this very simple approach, we can understand how important is this direction towards policy. And of course, the vision is by 2050, all European Union soil ecosystem must be in healthy state. So this is a very clear direction also for us scientists. An additional legal benchmark coming from the soil thematic strategies, the new definition by soil health, basically an healthy soil must be in good chemical and biological physical condition, and the strong connection with a series with 7 broad categories of ecosystem services, of course, food biomass, filtering, biodiversity, carbon, cultural services, raw material, and archaeology, geology, etc. So it's really a robust reference also for us scientists. And this is important. In addition, we shall hear about the importance of living lab and lighthouses by the Soil Mission Board. So, but let's spend just the last 2 minutes highlighting what about research on soil health. As you could see, I was looking for papers on Web of Science, having soil health as title just 2 days ago. And as you could see, in the last, let's say, 10 years, there has been quite an increase, but in the last 4 years, there has been an exponential increase of the number of papers having soil health in the title. So this is also an underestimation, of course, and we reached this year over 150 papers. So this exponential, of course, is reflected also by citations, as you can see here. So there is lots of work, but let's see behind these numbers. And the first thing I want to highlight, where this number comes from. Most of them come from the States, from India. If I sum all European countries, we end up, even considering UK, we end up about 80, 90. So basically, we are far behind in terms of number of records, and we must consider this. And basically, most these other slides show that soil health is not just soil science for soil scientists, but is truly strongly interdisciplinary. And another slide I need to show to you is that most of the papers comes from, let's say, public body who believe in soil health, like USDA, Indian Council of Research. So you see university, even Cornell, who has a special state for soil health, comes far behind. So there is a kind of public strong push towards this type of research. So today we are here. Thank you again. We have about 10 different international, mainly European projects, which are active. So lots of brain power. And we must, from this brain power, thanks to Marta and Lucas are here, we already from the beginning shall say that we shall try to produce a joint report as an outcome from this meeting. And today, the huge discussion session is about, can we really help European Union in implementing this huge expectation on soil policy? Are we able, maybe in our project or in connection between our project, how, by what means, what resources? So you see there is lots of issue and themes, but of course, we are in this moment, we have a special role, basically driving a series of projects, and really it's important to interact each other to see what we can do for them. Okay, I will stop here and I will leave the floor to Marta and for her presentation, and I will mute myself.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Fabio, for your introduction and for organizing this meeting. I'm very happy that I'm here with you today and to share our mission on the soil health and food area, which is called a Soil Deal for Europe. So as you mentioned, this meeting comes at a very good moment because missions have been recently launched 2.5 months ago, and now we are working on how to build this framework to roll out the mission. So if you allow me, I will start by playing a video that we have produced recently on the occasion of the Soil Day. And I think it's quite self-explanatory what are the issues that we have ahead and that we have to tackle them, no? So I think, yeah. Thank you very much, Anka, for sharing the video. So if we go back to the presentation. So you were referring to the soil strategy, the new soil strategy, but we also have the mission. This is another instrument that we have to address the issue of the soil health. So just to give you a bit of a understanding of this big project, so the mission started 2 years ago in September in 2019. The Commission appointed what we call the mission board. This is a group of high-level experts who were tasked to identify a potential mission in the area of soil health and food. That mission board was chaired by Kees Berman. You know, he's a former agriculture and environmental minister from Netherlands. So almost 1 year later, this mission board delivered a report, which was their proposal for a mission, which was called Caring for Soil is Caring for Life. You probably have heard about it. And in developing this report, the mission board took into consideration lots of feedback that we received from other sources, like the Mission Assembly, which was another group of experts who was also working with us, the member states, the citizens, and stakeholders. We organized in this year a lot of events that we received lots of input for this final report. So what happened in 2020 when the mission board delivered this report is that the Commission was tasked to provide a more detailed plan, what we call the mission implementation plan. This was it took us a year to produce this paper, and it was published last September on the 29th, which marked the official launch of the mission. Can you go for the next one, please? So on the day, 5 missions were officially launched. And just to give you and remind you what are missions. Missions were a new instrument on the Horizon Europe. The idea is to gather a large portfolio of actions that are addressing really important societal challenges. And the idea is to bring science closer to citizens. They want to demonstrate that this is through science is possible to achieve these challenges. So 5 missions were launched. This one on adaptation to climate change, on cancer, climate neutral and smart cities, restore our oceans and water, and our mission on soil, which is a soil year for Europe. The 5 missions, as you see, they're very synergetic. Let's say the mission on soil has also some synergies with the mission on health, in particular for contaminated soils, and also on oceans to let's say, we are challenging the effect of pollution. No, pollution on soils can contaminate, let's say, waters as well, and also in terms of food. And the mission on soil can also contribute to climate change adaptation and the greening of our cities. Next, please. So what do we have a mission on soil? Well, you have seen in the video, but just to mention a few, 95% of our food is produced on soils. And soils not only produce food, but also delivers, when they are healthy, what we call ecosystem services, like the water regulation, nutrient cycling, or carbon storage, which is very important today for the climate more than ever, for climate adaptation and mitigation, and to achieve these Green Deal objectives. In fact, some of the strategies that has been developed because of the Green Deals are having the soil health at their center, the core of the activities. So to revert these problems that we are facing now on soils, you know that the mission board has estimated, together with the Joint Research Center, that about 1/3 of soils in Europe are healthy. That means that 60 to 70% are not. So we really have a problem here, and this is where the mission comes in place. They want to, let's say, revert this problem. So in the mission board report, they conducted a call for evidence. They have demonstrated that through communication and research activities and efficient management of soil practices, we can really make this reverse point. So if we go for the next one, please, that one, yeah. So the mission overall is to set up 100 living labs and lighthouses, and to test, to have the test for innovation on soil health. So the mission is backed by 8 objectives, you see them there, that addresses mainly soil health challenges as the certification, conserving soil carbon stocks, soil sealing, pollution, erosion, and enhanced soil structure and biodiversity. There are 2 other objectives which are more, let's say, horizontal, cross-cutting, which is to reduce our global soil footprint and increase soil literacy in society. So just to mention that the mission is not limited to agricultural soil, but it has the ambitions to cover all types of soils from urban and rural areas and for all uses. So can we go for the next one, please? So the mission, we have let's say, a structure into building blocks. All these 4 building blocks are interconnected. So the first building block will have is the pure, let's say, ambitious research and innovation program, which has a strong societal science component, and the idea is to fill the gap in knowledge. So this first building block will look into soil health issues, but also the drivers of soil health, which is not so well known. The second building block is consists of the establishment of 100 living lab and lighthouses networks. And just to tell you that living labs are a real life testing sites in about 100 regions for experimentation, demonstration, and upscaling of solutions. The third building block is about soil monitoring. The mission aims at developing a harmonized framework for soil monitoring. And it is important to have it in place to track the state of our soils and the changes in soil health due to the actions that we intend to implement. We will close in collaboration, we will collaborate with member states, but also with the recently launched European Soil Observatory, which is another important element of this building block. And then the fourth building block is what we call the one for citizens and society. So the idea is to increase the awareness of the importance of soil and to collaborate with citizens in soil-related activities, but also to promote education and training on soils. Next, please. So living labs and lighthouses are really the central element of this mission. So if you allow me, I will give you a few more words on this. So it is important first to understand that a living lab itself is a cluster of between 10 or 20 sites at regional or sub-regional levels. So it can be farms, it can be forest stands, it can be urban settings. As I said, the mission covers all types of soils. So the final idea is to gather 100 living labs. So we are talking about 1,000 or 2,000 sites in which people from many different backgrounds and sectors can really go there and test and experiment solutions for soil health. While lighthouses are individual sites, could be just a farm, that they can showcase exemplary practices, no? And it can be inside of a living lab or outside. So this is another, let's say, concept. So for developing this network of living labs, we want to launch this concept little by little, and then expanding and scaling up the network. So this concept of the living labs has to be adapted to the specificities of the mission area. And the Commission has come up with a clear criteria of what could be labeled or qualify as a living lab in terms of the mission. So next slide, please. As I said, the mission is at the heart of the Grand Green Deal, and it really, let's say, contributes to achieve this 2050 target of being the first climate neutral continent. You have also mentioned it, Fabio, so this is something that is important to see and understand. So the mission includes targets to reduce, as I said, use of pesticide, fertilizers, which is very much in line to the farm to fork strategy, to increase the organic farming, and to reduce, for example, pollutions, in particular plastic pollution. As I said, the mission is support the objectives of these strategies that you see here, and the same objectives that are set out in the strategies are in the mission. So let's say the alignment and the instrument are, let's say, really direct and clear. Next, please. The mission, as you see, comes, as I said before, at a very good moment because we have just recently adopted the new soil strategy, but also we have launched last year the EU Soil Observatory. So with these three building blocks, we think we have a consistent instrument to achieve soil health in Europe. So just to say that there are many other policies and instruments that the mission intends to make use of. For example, the Common Agricultural Policy, the regional funds, the LIFE program, and other programs to facilitate the digital applications of for soil health or training. Just to give an example, our colleagues from DG Regio have highlighted the relevance of the mission activities for the restoration of former mining areas and the link with these just transition funds. Another example is under the Common Agricultural Policy. As you know, we have what we call the EIP Agri, the European Innovation Partnership. So we will work through them to reach farmers and to boost innovations in the area of soil health that could, let's say, help to duplicate or replicate the good practices that have been developed and tested under these EIP groups. And this is in particular important in regions where there are no living labs or lighthouses exist already. And also the mission will help to test and upscale the practices and tools promoted under the Common Agricultural Policy for the farm sustainability tool for nutrient management, this FAST tool that you probably have heard of. So the next one, please. So as you know, we are quite busy now building the mission in many different fronts. First, we are developing these necessary structures to coordinate the mission and implement their activities under the 4 building blocks that I just mentioned. So currently we are working on the work program. The first work program 2021, one topic is already out there and the call has been closed and proposals are currently evaluating. But we are going to have another work program amendment for 2021 with more topics. We are working on the 22 work program and we are thinking of first orientation for work program 2023. You see there's a bit of a decalage between the Horizon Europe work programs and the mission work program, but this is due that the mission was launched just very recently. And next slide, please. So as I mentioned, communication and citizen engagement is a central element of the mission. We want to bring science closer to citizens. So I just put here a lot of events that has taken place and more than 160, including those that mission board members have attended and represented us, the mission. We receive a lot of feedback from many stakeholders, and just to announce that we will be participating in 2022 at the beginning, the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture, and also will be present in the Salon de l'Agriculture in Paris. So we have developed a lot of communication material, games, videos, and surveys, which are at your use as well, and including the video that I just showed for last 3rd of December on the occasion of the Soil World Day. So with this, I'm finished my presentation, and I thank you very much for organizing this. I'm happy to work together for this important area of ensuring soil health in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. It was very useful. I would suggest also to shift now to Luca and then to have some firing question for both of you, since somehow the 2 presentations, I believe, will be somehow connected. So Luca, please share the screen. And
Okay. Thank you, Fabio, and good morning to everybody. So shall I share my screen?
Yes, please. I hope.
Yes, I do right away. Just let me know if you see my screen.
Yes, everything is fine.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I will very quickly talk about soil health from an European perspective. And the motivation for this talk is already been presented actually by you, Fabio, showing to us that we need an European perspective on soil health. Actually, because the term soil health emerged not in Europe, but emerged originally in US. And as you were showing through your literature review, still it's dominated by a vision that comes mostly from other parts of the world, not from the European community. And this is very important that we have an European perspective also because we have our own vision concerning what we want to do about soils. The vision, as you know, was presented just recently, actually on the 17th of November, when the Commission presented its new soil strategy. And in the new soil strategy, we have a vision of achieving healthy soils in the EU by 2050, which is a pretty long-term vision, but still means that we need to act now because, as you know, soils are pretty resilient and need quite some time to change their condition in order to achieve this ambitious target to have healthy soils by 2050. But the key question now on the table is, of course, what do we mean with healthy soils? And what we mean with healthy soils is different from what other colleagues in other parts of the world mean. It reminds me a little bit of the discussion years ago when in OECD the soil quality concept emerged. I'm talking nearly 30 years ago. And again, it was a concept mostly driven by a vision coming from our colleagues across the ocean, from the United States, very often linked to a monofunctional vision of soils mainly as the basis for agricultural production. So a good soil is a soil that produces a lot in a sustainable way. Well, we have a quite different vision, and the vision has still to be crystallized and further developed. As was already said, at the heart of the strategy, there is the soil health concept to be fully defined. The sustainable soil management concept, which is already well defined, I would say, from the work done by the Global Soil Partnership within FAO. And then the concept of soil restoration, which is also quite well documented, but also, of course, linked to the definition of soil health. So restoring soils to a healthy condition needs first to define what we mean by healthy condition. Now, in the strategy, if you have been reading it, you will find a box saying what the Commission thinks that a healthy soil is. Soils are healthy when they are in good chemical, biological, and physical condition and are able to deliver a list of ecosystem services, which is a list of 7 services that were already identified in the previous strategy. As you may know, we presented a strategy in 2006 already, which contained these 7 functions at that time were defined, but essentially these are ecosystem services. And there are, of course, services that are the thing that we would like to protect, but also are the concept that is driving us in defining what a good soil or a healthy soil is. And these 7 functions are, of course, much broader than what originally is being the driver of soil health, which is the first function, biomass production, including agriculture and forestry. So a healthy soil is not only a soil that produces a lot in a healthy and sustainable way, but it's also a soil, for example, that provides clean drinking water, so the storing, filtering, transforming function of soils. Or it's a soil that is holding a very important biodiversity pool. So the function of soil to be a habitat for biodiversity and for soil ecosystems. But also a function of soil is, of course, to allow us to live somewhere. So it's a function of soil to sustain our infrastructure, our housing, our cities, our lives. We have to live somewhere. So a good soil may be a good soil for building a house. And the 5th function is linked to that in a way, because soils can also provide raw materials. So there can be soils that are particularly good in producing raw materials for our daily life. Very important then the function 6, which is about acting as a carbon pool, which is the key function of soils within the climate change debate. And I don't have to explain this further because it's well known that it's a very large carbon pool, actually the 2nd largest carbon pool after the oceans. And so it's very important that this function gets preserved. And finally, for us in Europe, very important, because we have a long history of and a heritage to protect, is the function of soil to act as an archive of geological and archaeological heritage. So this is just a start of the discussion, because these functions were not identified now. They were identified already in 2006, so quite some time ago, and of course need revisiting and need to be put in the context of the new vision of a healthy soil condition. And of course, this is a research task that is in front of us. But let me also say that there's been a lot of research about what is the trade-offs that we need to deal with when we need to deal with ecosystem services and with preserving ecosystem services in a sustainable way. I think that the Intergovernmental Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has done quite a lot of work on this. Particularly, I would like to mention the Land Degradation and Restoration Assessment of 2018, where this was extensively documented, how human transformations of natural systems and the necessary trade-offs impact on biodiversity and ecosystem services. Just to show you this example, if you start from an undegraded state, so assuming a paradise without humans, there you have all the ecosystem services in a balanced situation and in an equilibrium that is driven, of course, by purely natural conditions. As soon as there is an impact by anthropic action, so by us, for example, starting with extensive agriculture, you will start enhancing one of the services, which is food production. And you may even enhance it further at the cost of other services by applying intensive agricultural methods. But you may end up, if you don't manage well such a very intensive system, in a quite degraded situation, which is the last situation where all ecosystem services have been lost. This brings me to another topic, which I think is crucial, especially here in Europe, and that was well addressed and extensively documented in the Land Degradation Restoration Assessment of IPBES, which is the issue of concepts and perceptions. So entering another dimension of dealing with what we consider healthy soils, which may not particularly linked with hard physical, chemical, and biological data, but is linked with perceptions of citizens and humans. If we take this classic example of a landscape, this is not Europe, this is, but you could find it also in Europe. And I mean, if you go, for example, in the Beauce area in central France, I mean, around Paris, you will find landscapes like this, but this is a typical Midwest of US landscape of a tidy, well-managed, if I would say so, wheat field. As you see, when you see this picture, of course, different actors will have different perceptions. An ecologist will find this degraded land, so essentially it's not much biodiversity here left. A botanist will say one single species. A tourist may find this beautiful. Actually, we have a lot of people who love to drive through these areas because they feel that this is a nice landscape, a quite challenging area. A farmer will find this a perfect, well-managed, tidy wheat field, and a baker will make bread out of it. So he says good production for bread production. So as you see, perceptions are very important, and there are values attached to perceptions, which is not only scientific knowledge, but also aesthetic values, utilitarian values, all kind of values that people attach to landscapes. And that's why we need to have a close look to what we intend when we say restoring degraded landscapes, degraded soils, because restoration will have major impact on our landscapes, but also restoration needs to be done in a way that is scientifically sound. So you cannot only base it on perceptions, you need also to go back to hard data. And if you see these examples, I mean, these are restoration examples across different situations. You will see that a system that has been restored, but of course you may have situations underlying that you are not visible to us directly that are maybe affecting those areas. I take the example of contamination, for example, that is not directly visible, or other issues. So we need to go back to hard data. And that's why, and Marta already highlighted this, we give quite a large importance now to having an improved system of collecting soil data, hard data across the European Union by launching the EU Soil Observatory that was launched last year on the 5th of December, which is building on what we have been already doing over the last 20 years, which is the European Soil Data Center, but which is expanding its capacity to monitor soils by integrating also what is done at national level and connecting all this to a dashboard system that will allow us to have clear indicators linked to the various policies, allowing us to operationally monitor in a clear way if we are going the right direction or not. A typical traffic light system. Continuing, of course, supporting with data the research effort that is needed and participatory. So they need that an observatory cannot be an operation that is done in a top-down approach in isolation, but needs to involve also the European stakeholders, citizens, NGOs, member states, of course, industry, farmers, because as I said, there is an issue not only of hard data, but there is also an issue about perceptions and about concepts that are maybe different for different actors and different stakeholders. So just to the monitoring part, because that's of course the core of the business of the observatory. As you know, we have quite well functioning now EU-wide monitoring system called LUCAS, Land Use, Land Cover Area Survey, which includes also a soil module where we collect on the field roughly on 25,000 sites on a regular basis soil samples that get stored in a European archive so that we can go back to those samples. And this allows us to detect a number of parameters, hard parameters like physical, chemical, biological measurements. And this is done on a regular basis. Now we have done 2009, 2015, 2018. Now we're in the new survey of 2021-22, allows us to have a time series of these parameters that will allow us to say if we are going in the good or bad direction. So these are parameters that can be, of course, I don't go through all of them, of course, but they can be specialized so that you can interpolate those point observations and then have maps of different properties, for example, organic carbon content or total nitrogen content or whatever. And these, of course, are properties that can tell you about the status of soils across Europe over time. Still, we need to do some research in translating this into a concept of soil health. What is a healthy soil? A soil with a lot of organic carbon, or a soil with a lot of biodiversity, or a combination of all this? So there is still a step to be done to bring all this together into a soil health concept that comes from an European perspective. And particularly crucial will be the definition of thresholds, because you will need to say exactly after which level you will find that a soil is not in a healthy condition anymore. This is particularly relevant for contaminants, but also for other processes like soil erosion or others. So all this will translate, of course, in a simplified dashboard system that will allow us to closely monitor the various policies in the EU that are relevant to soils. And this will give you in a green, yellow, orange, red system a possibility to monitor on a regular basis if we're not going in the right direction or not. Finally, as I said, important is to keep the door open to a continuous debate with everybody, scientific community, stakeholders, industry, farmers, NGOs, everybody interested. And we started this by doing the first stakeholder forum on 19-21 of October. And we will continue this process. We have just established specific working groups at that first meeting of the stakeholder forum. And these working groups will now allow everybody to continue the debate and to continue the interaction. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luca, for this also very nice presentation, which help us, of course, these two talks will help us somehow to give some benchmark direction also for the following session. I will stop a moment here to know whether there are some firing questions for Marta and Luca. And before proceeding further, then of course, I know that Luca may leave, but we have the final discussion also. So it's very important now if there are some specific questions. Okay, I know that Marta reacted already on the chat, but let me ask myself one thing to Marta. So I have seen that there is lots of, out from this mission, including submission, lots of focus in terms of what this is the perception of coordination support action. So since, as Luca said, the research is a really important topic in Solar, my obvious question would be whether will be also research and innovation action from the Soil mission.
Yes.
And yes.
Yes. What it has been public, it was just one topic of the 21 program, which was a necessary, let's say, to build the structures for deployment of the mission. In the update of the work program 2021, so it's going to be published now at the end of this month, there will be more research and innovation actions. Yes. And then in the upcoming programs, again, for the 2022, we are also working currently on this, and there will be research and innovation actions. Yes, your question has come also from the member states as well. Huh? But the reason is that as the missions were very recently, let's say, launched, and then the first work program came very quickly. So the first action that we had was this coordination action. But at the end of this month, you'll have the update of the 2021 work program. The deadline for proposal is this March, so it's not that far. And we will have an info day, I put it in the chat, but on the 19th of January, where we are going to present these topics, let's say, more in detail, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So, and for the 2022, again, we will have more research topics, but the mission is should be, let's say, effective, and by 2030 we have to have already results. So I mean, we will have research of core actions because it's needed to advance the knowledge, but we will have a lot of demonstration actions as well. So
yeah, I hope the 19 will have also a chance to understand us in terms of research, whether there is a place also for us in this living lab Lighthouses or not. Sure. Because we are a bit, as a community, a bit confused whether there is also a room for us or not, or is more yes.
Yes, it's the time there to ask questions. We will have the first, let's say, topic on building this network of living labs and lighthouses. As I said, you see in the presentation, it's going to be progressively, no? So the first actions will be already launched in 2021. So, and then it will be growing this network with more budget and dedicated calls for this. But yes, of course, you have a place on all this picture. Yes. So as soon as I have the link for the info day, I will send it to you so you can also distribute it, and we'll be there happy to answer the questions as much as we can.
Okay. A question to Luca, because I know that Luca may not follow the entire day. So Luca, since you are in Georgia Research Center, so you are really the bridge between research, commission, etc., can you give us some direction where to go together? As from a European Commission viewpoint, a day like this one, what, yes, would you like to give us some direction also for the discussion? What would you expect from a day like this one? We are many projects, so it's a good moment to give us.
I think that as it's been spelled out also in the strategy, we need to have a contribution from the research community concerning soil health and the definition and how we want to go about soil health in Europe. And I think there need to come, as you already showed, Fabio, in your statistics about research publications overall globally on soil health, we need to have a substantial contribution from the EU, especially from the European, let's say, scientific community on how we want to define soil health for the European Union, how we want to monitor soil health in the European Union, how we want to improve soil health in the European Union. So there is quite a research task, in my view, in front of us. The Joint Research Center is, of course, contributing, and we are at the science policy interface, but I think you, as in this meeting, representing somehow a EU-wide community of researchers and research projects, can help quite a lot in that process. Of course, the definition then in legal terms of soil health, especially in view, as you know, the Commission has announced that it will prepare a proposal for a soil health law, so a legally binding instrument. Of course, then the legal definition will be based on scientific evidence, but also will be a discussion probably between member states in parliament and so on. But I mean, having a strong scientific basis for that discussion would be extremely helpful, I think. And so, it would be good if this scientific basis comes from Europe, not from other parts of the world. So I think there's quite some work for you in front of all of us, actually, for the next years.
Okay, thank you very much. Other fighting question? Okay, in that case, we move to the tour de table. Thank you again. It was very enlightening, really, these first two presentations, at least for me. And I would leave the floor to Anka. And I will just ask to you to keep the 5 minutes time step we decided together. And Anka, please, you drive this tour de table session.
Thank you very much, Fabio. So I'll share the presentation and we'll start. First, we have the GSP. I'm not sure Mr. Ronald Vargas could join us for this one. So we'll move to the 4P initiative for this one. So please, Miss Paloma, the floor is yours for this one.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. I would like to introduce rapidly what is the 4P initiative. It is not a project, it is an international organization, and the name is Initiative for Permil, Soils for Food Security and Climate. And this initiative is related to soil carbon, and is federating all voluntary stakeholders of the public and private sectors, including national and local and regional governments, companies, trade organizations, NGOs, research institutions, under the framework of the Lima Paris Action Plan. The initiative was launched in December the 1st in the COP21 in Paris in 2015, and it was launched by France. At this moment, the funding governments and institutions are the French, German and Spanish Ministries of Agriculture, also the Occitane region, the IRD, GIRAD, INRAE, Regeneration International, and the Alliance of Biodiversity and Theatre of the CGR. The overall budget is 1 million euros every year and is coordinated by the Executive Secretary, Paul Lou. And at November of this year, the number of partners in the forum are 660, and in the consortium 295. 48 countries and provinces are in the forum or consortium, 17 international and regional organizations, 11 foundation and development banks, 231 NGOs, 99 research and education bodies or universities, and 74 farmers organizations, and 190 enterprises. The overall primary objective of the initiative is to demonstrate that agriculture, and in particular agricultural soils, can play a crucial role where food security and climate change are concerned. And the ambition is to encourage all stakeholders to transition towards a productive, highly resilient agriculture based on the management of lands and soils, creating jobs and incomes, hence ensuring sustainable development. Please, the next slide. Please.
Is the next slide not on?
For those who that don't know the initiative, the reason of the name of the initiative is based in that an annual growth rate of 4 per mil in the soil carbon stocks, or in the first 34 centimeters of soil, would significantly reduce the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere related to human activities. And this growth is not a normative target for each country, but is intended to show that even a small increase in the soil carbon stock is crucial to improve soil fertility and agricultural production, and to contribute to achieving the long-term objective of limiting the temperature increase to the +2 degrees threshold, beyond which the IPCC indicates that the effects of climate change are significant. This increase in the amount of carbon in soil will contribute to not only to stabilize the climate, but also to ensure food security. And different measures need to be put in place, as reduce deforestation, encourage agroecological practices, and this increasing of organic matter in soils will play a role in 4 important ecosystem services: resistant to soil erosion, soil water retention, soil fertility for plants, and soil biodiversity. This is the main important actions and aims of the initiative, and I think this enters very well in the definition of soil health on the EU strategy published by the EU Commission. Well, thank you very much. This is everything by my place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move to the next presentation, and then we will leave some room for questions at the end of the tour de table. So the next presentation is from Mr. Jack Faber, representing the project Siren in EGP Soil. So please, Mr. Faber, the floor is yours for the next presentation.
Thank you, Anka. I am Jacques Faber. I represent Wageningen Research in the Netherlands, and this presentation is on the AGP soil program towards climate-smart, sustainable agricultural soil management. And I've prepared this presentation together with the coordinator of this program, Claire Chenu from INRA in France. It's a big program that is co-funded by DG Agri half, and for the other half by the participating 24 member states. And it's a new kind of programming that is a co-fund, meaning that there has to be a matching between the European agenda for research and knowledge dissipation and the agendas of the individual member states. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization going on. The objective of this program is to create an enabling research environment to enhance the contribution of agricultural soils in addressing the key societal
challenges. Now, not all of them, but it's focusing on sustainable agricultural production and climate change adaptation and mitigation in agriculture and sustainable environment, and that would include healthy soils. Now, Anka, if I can have the next slide, please. The building blocks of the program have already been established, as it were, by Marta Iglesias before me. It is not only the development of knowledge through research, but also the dissipation of knowledge and capacity building between the member states and between the different levels of governance, as well as collecting data and structuring and archiving data, and the implementation of knowledge in the more fields of actors like farmers and farmer organizations. Now, again, these building blocks apply to the fields of agricultural production and climate change adaptations and sustainable environment. And key in all these social development goals areas is soil health. And that is why I present this presentation, because one of the first activities of the program was to have a stocktake amongst the member states to see how, if and how soil data are used in the member state to assess both soil quality and soil health and the ecosystem services that healthy soils provide, and how then these data are used in the linkage between the two. And that stocktake activity is the Siren project that is depicted on the next slide. Anka, please. That is really a small project, but all the member states, almost all the member states, are participating. And this project then aims to establish how linkage between soil quality and ecosystem services is, and ecosystem assessment is developed in the member states. The next slide. I would like you to present some outcome of the Siren project. It's still running, and we are in a draft reporting phase, and I'm reluctant to show you the real results of the project, as I feel we first need to present those to our funders and get the finalization established before we go public. But I'd like to claim some differences that the Siren project will have made. And one is the conceptual framework that we've been working on, linking soil quality to ecosystem service provision. We have used all the relevant definitions, concepts that are there and are usually very unclear and a bit interpretable for many different meanings. And this framework comprises all the different concepts like soil functions and provision of supply of ecosystems, actual flow of services. All these concepts are in there in a consistent way. And that is, I think, essential. You can define any concept, but if you do not put it in a position relative to other concepts, then confusion may arise. So maybe this can help in defining soil health in a legal context as well, Luca. Another result is that we have taken stock of how member states use soil data in ecosystem assessment. And I can tell you that this is really in its child cues. It's not done very regularly and very widely and very detailedly, but member states are starting to do this. So that's a promising thing. And a last claim that I would like to make is that we have an overview of indicators for soil health that are policy relevant, defined by policy, and also scientifically sound, proven in science. But I will not mention them right now. In a month or two, you will hear from us again. Now, if I am to tell you what we think in the Siren project would help mostly in promoting the implementation of the soil health concept, and we would say that it is very essential that we get a good description of what policy considers a good condition of the ecosystem. It's both the policy definition and you think about conditions like no net loss of carbon or no net loss of species. Things are being defined lately. And once that is done, we can then develop the selection of appropriate soil quality indicators for the assessment of soil health and develop appropriate criteria as well. But we should do that not just as scientists, but in the triangular interaction with policy, and do not forget the stakeholders. And it's the stakeholders that are the actors, or like farmers, or the end users of the ecosystem services. And if I can have the last slides, I would give you some entry to the discussion later on.
Yeah, we have Jack, we must go toward the end. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I would argue that we maintain the concept of soil quality, which is the continued capacity of soil function, and soil health, which is the actual capability of soil. There's a lot of environmental economy theory behind this, and we should not forget that as soil scientists. I'm sorry that I'm running out of time, but I can bring this back in the discussion later on, if you please. Thank you for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Faber. We move to the next presentation now, which is given by Ms. Francesca Assenato, representing the project Soil for Life. So please, Ms. Assenato, the floor is yours for this one.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here with our colleagues also inside the same projects, and this discussion is very useful to drive this very ambitious program from the EU. We present today the LIFE project. It is not a research project, but a governance project, Soil for Life, including partners mainly from Italy and from Croatia. Next slide, please. Thank you. Mainly this project is led by Legambiente, and it is mainly devoted to promoting the sustainable and efficient use of soils in terms of delivering our ecosystem services, and in the as a function of carbon storage and to prevent soil sealing. On the ground, there was the promotion of the application of sustainable soil management voluntary guidelines from FAO, and our specific objective were the first was to raise the awareness about the need to adopt the appropriate legislation, and now we are in this moment waiting for new EU law on soil. So this was a work very appropriate for these years. The second objective was the promotion of reduction of land consumption in urban and territorial planning. and helping decision makers with appropriate tools, information on soil protection and planning tools, but also to increase the knowledge and awareness for farmers, technicians, and citizens about soil functions and impact of anthropic activities on soil functions in terms of loss of ecosystem services, and about the practices to maintain and restore the adequate organic carbon content, especially in agricultural soil. Next slide, please. As you asked for a very synthetic comment from our project, what we stressed a lot is the necessity of legislative measure for soil protection. And in this direction, we produced for Italy a white paper and the charter principle for sustainable soil use that is now being proposed to administrations, institutions, and stakeholders for the adoption. In our review, the first concept we have to have in mind is that soils must exist to be managed and to produce services. And in this sense, the first action needed is the legislation to avoid and prevent land consumption. Without soils, we have no matter of discussion for all other topics. I conclude this my very small presentation, inviting you to see our products on the website of the project and to share ideas with us also in the other projects we have in common. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Assenato, for your presentation. We move to the next project, which is Circasa, and today is represented by Mr. Matthias Kunert. So please, Mr. Kunert, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Matthias Kunert from the University of Aberdeen, and I have the pleasure to present the project Circasa. And the slides I will show were produced together with the coordinators led by Jean-François Susanna from INRAE in France. Next slide, please. To bring Circasa in context, Circasa is on soil organic carbon on agricultural soils. And the motivation came from different initiatives, not at least the global initiatives like the Excalibur Project or the UNFCCC Coronivia workshop, who showed that there is a demand for more, or there's some benefits of having more soil organic carbon in soil. Then there's some demand for getting some more knowledge about soil organic carbon in soils from the private sector. Some private sector initiatives like Terra Cotton Challenge or also certification schemes that look into carbon trading and see if the negative emissions of soils can be traded on a trading platform. And not at least of the European initiatives or actions. Some of them were already introduced. Others are listed here, like the Board of Soil Health, Food and UA. Next slide, please. Circasa includes 22 partners from 17 countries. The countries cover the entire world, as you can see on the map. And also includes some secretariats from the FOPABLE initiative, the Global Research Science, and other collaborations. So it's a well-connected project. It started in 2017 and ended at the beginning of last year due to some extensions. And the aim was to developing an international synergy concern research and knowledge exchange in the field of carbon sequestration in agriculture soil. And this includes a focus on the European Union, but also includes global views, or includes all countries of the world, and also includes projects that include global aspects. Next slide, please. The work plan, it's quite simple. It is work package 1 looked on the review of scientific and technical evidence that is there for soil organic carbon, and that work package 2 included the stakeholder views and knowledge and the research needs. This built together the basis for work package 3, where there was a co-design of strategy and research agenda. The idea was more to bring groups together and interact in building networks. So for future, there's a plan to establish an international research consortium to coordinate this research on soil organic carbon a little bit better in future and avoid redundancy. Next slide, please. As I got asked about the impact of the project to soil health, I tried to summarize this. The project was on soil organic carbon. I don't claim that soil organic carbon can be translated directly to soil health. However, I think it's some activities improving or increasing soil organic carbon will also have a positive impact on soil health. So I just translate the results here. So one major finding was that we were able to develop an measuring, reporting, and verification framework for soil organic carbon from the research point of view. So it's optimum, how should an MRV look like to monitor soil organic carbon. And we analyzed the gaps and barriers for implementing strategies to improve the soils, or to increase soil organic carbon. And we built the basis for international coordination at the International Research Consortium. And the other question was, what is needed to improve soil health in future? I was wondering how to address this, and I just looked on one analysis we have done. This was a survey where hundreds of people, more than 1,000 people got asked about our knowledge stage about different parts in the process of increasing soil organic carbon. And this included researcher, farmer, policymaker, all entire range. And here I list 5 highlights about where the result showed that the knowledge is not that good. So the blue ones show more the process understanding, like improve the understanding of SOC saturation, improve the understanding of the microbes in the soil, and improve the understanding of deep SOC. And more looking on barriers on other fields, not on the processes, were a suitable measuring and monitoring concept, which is also mentioned earlier by Luca, because right now we have already some trading platforms using an MRV on a simple level, while research provides a really complex concept. So there's a gap between reality and demand, and so research and the private sector need to come closer together. And economic solutions, which includes also, it was also mentioned earlier that the benefits, or the farmers are working on the soils, have to invest, have to make the action, which might affect costs, or might result in cost or affect yield losses. Also nicely shown by Luca, if you have the food production increasing, the ecosystem services for food production, other services will be decreased. And so the question is, what does it mean? Who pays for the improvement and who benefits from it? And this is also a problem that needs to be resolved. So next slide, please.
Matthias,
yes. My side. Thank you very much. And yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for your presentation. We move to the next project, which is CEU Soil, which is represented today by Mr. Stelios Kotsopoulos. So the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes, Stelios, please.
So thank you, Anka, for the introduction, and of course, thank you, the Land Support, for the invitation to present what we are doing in the CEU Soil. I'm Stelios Kotsopoulos. I'm the R&D Director of AgRabs. I'm work package leader on developing the IT part of the project, and as a member of the Laboratory of Agricultural Engineering, I'm assisting Professor Moscou on the coordination of the project. So can we go on the next slide, Anka? Can we move? Yeah, thank you. The main goal of the CEU Soil, well, the idea behind the CEU Soil is how we can use all this wealth of open data that the last 10 years are made available from several public bodies, and of course, how we can use the two intensive Earth observation programs, the one from EU and the other one from China, not to make soils, the soil healthier, but to identify the status, to make an operational monitoring of the status of the soil, and to provide early warnings, and also to collect data regarding the soil that are acting as constraint parameters for the increasing the agricultural productivity, and of course to use it to provide several information either in two different levels, the one for the policymakers, but also to provide this information to the grassroots users like the smallholder farmers. Something that is important because it is a Sino-European action beside all the technological part and the scientific. It's also the scientific diplomacy part that one of the goals is to strengthen the collaboration between the European scientists and with the Chinese scientists on the soil science sector. And this is something that we have achieved because if you search for the CEU Soil, we have already more than 45 publications until now. On the next slide, please. The project is coordinated by the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Project coordinator is Professor Dimitrios Moscou, and the scientific coordinator is from the University of Ghent, the Professor Abdul Muazzem. The project started on June of 2019. Before COVID, the duration, it was 36 months, but after COVID, because we had some delays due to the restriction measures with the pilot activities, we took a force majeure 6 months more. So the end of is on the end of November of 2022. The consortium is consisted from 23 partners. 15 of them are coming from the European Union, one from Switzerland, and 7 partners from China. And the total budget is 6.88 million euros, where the EU contribution is close to 5 million euros. The next slide, please. So the main innovation is to handle all this data, the wealth of this big volume of data available regarding several environmental parameters that are affecting the soil health, and to provide some early alerts regarding the status, the health status of the soil, to prevent further degradation of their quality. But something else is to use this information and provide this to support policy-making decisions regarding the suitability of the soils, either as land uses or as crop on a high level, but also to provide this information to the smallholder farmers through digital tools to use this information and take decisions regarding the agricultural inputs that they are affecting their crop productivity, and to optimize all this not only from the part of the cost, but also to reduce the environmental footprint and achieve the farm to fork goals. Something that we are searching, if we go to Anka, please, on the next slide, always we are searching for the for collaborations with other initiatives, with international organizations and other EU projects. Before, Fabio, if I remember correctly, it was 1 year before that we met and we made this discussion between CU Soil and Land Support, and of course with others that they are presenting their H2020 projects. We have discussed to make this synergies, and of course we are open to any collaboration or knowledge exchange between projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stelios, for your presentation. We move to the next presentation that is of Ms. Sara Brubri, that is representing the AgroMix project.
Thank you very much, Anka and Fabio and all the organizers for inviting me to this networking event. I'm Sara Burbi. I work at Country University, though I'm also Italian. And I coordinate AgroMix. AgroMix stands for Agroforestry and Mixed Farming Systems, and we want to carry out participatory research to drive the transition to a resilient and efficient land use in Europe. Next slide, please. I'll give you a brief introduction to the project and key information. So we're one of the last Horizon 2020 projects that has been awarded, and we're part of the topic on climate smart and resilient farming. We have just completed the first year last month. The overall budget is roughly a bit less than 7 million, coordinated by Country University. We're a large consortium with 28 partners, but we have a good balance with quite a few multi-actors that are not academic. So we're talking about NGOs or farmers. We actually have farms and other non-academic entities. And there are 14 countries represented. Next slide, please. Now, the main aim of AgroMix is, as I mentioned, participatory research to support the transition to a more resilient and efficient land use in Europe. But how? We want to adopt practical agroecological solutions. We're talking about systems that are fairly complex and perhaps a bit daunting to manage for some stakeholders. But there are a number of benefits that we know these systems are delivering. We want to also complement this with some economic modeling or advancement in that sense, because the missing bits are primarily economic. And of course, all this within the context of climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. So in doing that, we also want to explore the potential for some novel approaches, technologies as well. We are working on a serious game that have the aim to promote innovation. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a brief snippet of the approaches we're using, and in particular in relation to ecosystem services, which is highly relevant to soil health. So as I mentioned, we want to connect and integrate knowledges, essentially fill the gaps and connect the dots, boost synergies between a number of projects and as well partners and countries. We work along two main lines. One is with some experimental sites that are across agroclimatic regions. And there we do measurements and calculations and modeling regarding productivity, biodiversity, and soil carbon sequestration. And on the other hand, we also work with what we call co-design pilots, which is the predecessor of living labs, essentially, where we have these 12 groups. In some cases, there are farms. In some cases, there are a group of farms or communities. And we do participatory work with them to co-redesign systems or try to facilitate the transition, working together with the stakeholders based on their specific needs. Now, I'm giving here a really quick snippets of some preliminary results we got regarding ecosystem services. And you can see the top concerns are soil fertility, carbon sequestration, food production, so crops, carbon cycling, and nitrogen fixation, and soil erosion, so reducing erosion. So these are the biggest concerns we found so far. Next slide, please. And in terms of innovation, I decided to mention, well, there are a number of innovations, of course. It's a large research innovation action, but serious games. So I don't know how many of you are aware of what is a serious game. Essentially, we have set up a number of knowledge hubs where all partners and externals as well can contribute and access information. There's a lot of information in a lot of languages on this continent, but we need to, as I said, connect the dots sometimes and boost collaboration. Now, from that, and from also all the research activities within the project, everything is going to converge to building up knowledge. And the serious game that we want to, the prototype of serious game that we want to build is essentially a way, a fun way to have a real life experience of what could be transition scenarios. And it sounds a bit complex, but it's a bit a crossing between a board game and perhaps escape rooms, if some of you are aware of that. So we have different scenarios, and users can visualize different scenarios that they want to achieve for their transition. And they also have a way of creating new networks and collaborations within the gameplay, basically. So this is essentially what we're working on at the moment. Next slide, I think that's the last one. You can find out a lot more about what we are working on, and even details about the various sites and pilots and what we are up to on our website and our several media channels. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. We move to the next presentation, which is of Stefano Mocali, representing the project Excalibur. So please, Stefano, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but so first of all, thank you for inviting me. So I'm Stefano Mocali from CREA Firenze in Italy. I'm coordinating the Excalibur Project, which is a research and innovation project funded under the Horizon program, 2020 program. It started in June 2019, and it will end in November 2024. It involves 16 different partners, including research bodies, producers, consultants, farmer associations, etc., from 11 European countries. The project is focused on soil biodiversity. That's the core business of the project. And the main goal is to improve the knowledge of soil biodiversity dynamics in relation to different agroecological factors, mainly for enhancing the efficacy of biocontrol and biofertilization practices in horticulture farming. We focus mainly on 3 model crops: tomato, apple, and strawberry. Next slide, please. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the overall concept of the project, starting on the left, where the above mentioned crops, which have been used in 30 experimental trials across Europe under different pedoclimatic conditions, and they are put under different biotic or abiotic stress. Okay, so depending on the specific biotic or abiotic stress, we selected a number of microbial strains already available in the partners collection, which are already well known to be effective against those specific stresses, and use and combine also with bioeffectors and other strains to formulate and develop new multifunctional bioproducts to be applied on the field. So the efficacy of these treatments under field conditions will be monitored during the next 3 years, because these treatments were done in spring 2021. So the work is still in progress, but the main focus will be put on exploring the soil-plant micro interactions occurring below ground. Okay, so this information, this new knowledge will be useful for sure for the industrial partners, for manufacturers, in order to develop, to optimize the formulation pipeline, the production of the bioinoculant, etc. But at the same time, this information will be useful to enhance our knowledge about biodiversity dynamics, spatial temporal dynamics, and also to provide new tools, new guidelines, new practices that will be useful for the end users and in particular for farmers, in order to let them adopt biodiversity-driven soil management strategies. So next slide, please. So coming to the relationship between the link between Excalibur and soil health concept. Actually, also due to the COVID pandemic, we had several delays. So we are actually not ready to provide, we don't have any product or knowledge already available now, but we are going to have in the next months, and we are expecting to have such results by the end of the project. And first of all, we expect to improve our knowledge on soil biodiversity dynamics, and the soil plant micro interactions will play a key role in this. And this knowledge will be the base for the adoption of a holistic strategy, based on on biodiversity, in order to adopt a new soil management approach, for a more sustainable horticulture. And the expected knowledge and information and data will be used to make a predictive model on soil biodiversity. And this will be done thanks to partners which has previous experience with other projects like Predict project. And this model will be used to set up and develop a DSS for the adoption of such biodiversity driven soil management practice. And these tools are just a part of the tools that we are aiming to provide, because last but not least, we are also doing and developing a number of tools for the detection of microbial bioinoculant in the soil to address soil microbial diversity in a very cheap and easy way. And so these tools will be useful for monitoring purposes, of course, but also considering the upcoming new fertilizer product regulation that will be adopted next year. So a number of interesting outputs will be available very soon. But unfortunately, the last point is not visible completely. I don't know if it moved in another slide or not, but our main idea, our suggestion coming from our experience in this project, is focused on the knowledge, the need to have a better knowledge of soil biodiversity dynamics in terms of taxonomic and genetic variability, but also functional variability. And this variability changes a lot across time and across space. And when I say space, I mean horizontal and vertical space. So what is missing is there are several conceptual and methodological biases in the concept of biodiversity. So when we are talking about monitoring or assessing biodiversity, we should should be very careful in identifying reliable indicators, to define the sensitivity of these indicators, because we have a lot of information, a lot of data and indicators on soil biodiversity, but what we really need is to better integrate this information, to harmonize the methodological campaign at national and international level, and to better link the soil biodiversity with soil pedodiversity. Okay, so the point that Luca Montanarella mentioned before about the importance of determining the threshold values above or below which a soil may be defined as healthy or not. It's very crucial. So this will be discussed, I hope, later in the discussion time. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for your presentation. And we move to the next presentation, which comes from the Landmark project. And we have Mr. Christian Hendrickson today with us. So Christian, please, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much, Anka. I don't know if you can see my screen. Should be visible.
I stopped sharing, so
okay, so I should share screen now. Okay, I will share the screen. Yes.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Yes. So my name is Christian Hendrickson. I'm associate professor here at the University of Copenhagen, where I'm leading the research group on climate and food security. And I'm presenting the results from the Landmark project that was coordinated by Wageningen University by Professor Rachel Kramer. So this was a project that started 1st of May 2015 until the end of October 19. And we had 22 partners in the consortium, so quite a large consortium, a really pan-European consortium, as you can see here, with a lot of countries spread across Europe, as well as also contribution from Brazil and China. So the overarching objective of the Landmark project was to comprehensively quantify the current and potential supply of soil functions across the EU, as determined by both soil properties, land use, and soil management practices. So we kind of had 3 different blueprints, you could say, in the Landmark project that are also our 3 major outcomes. The first one was also called Pillar 1, and that was actually what I was leading. I was leading the Pillar 1. So here we were developing the Soil Navigator decision support system for assessing and optimizing soil functions. So the idea was here to create a decision support system for farmers where they could basically learn how to assess and optimize their soil functions. So as you can see here to the left, the farmers were able to enter first input about the agro-ecosystem, the land use, the management, the environment, and different soil parameters that were measured on the farm. Then the Soil Navigator was, you could start the Soil Navigator to assess these 5 soil functions: primary productivity, water purification regulation, biodiversity and habitat provision, nutrient cycling, and climate regulation. Then farmers were then able to prioritize which of these soil functions they would like to increase, and then there would be an output of the potential achievement of these soil functions, followed by some management recommendations. And I'll actually try just to play a brief video here so that you can get an idea about how it works.
How to make the most of our land. What do you know about soil performance in your field? Our soils need to deliver on so many expectations. This is a challenge, but there is help. Let us introduce the Soil Navigator. It is an agricultural decision support system developed within the Landmark project. It assesses and improves the supply of 5 soil functions simultaneously. You define the data inputs from your field, then you get an assessment of the initial soil function capacities. Next, choose which capacities you want to increase. Finally, the Navigator suggests management solutions to improve the multifunctionality of your soil. Interested? The Soil Navigator is online and freely available for everyone. Find out more at our website or watch our video tutorials.
So that was a quick introduction to the Soil Navigator. Then the second pillar in the project, the second outcome, was a soil monitoring framework. So this was done by sampling 48 data points and 46 data points on grassland across Europe, where we basically went out and took a lot of soil samples to be able to feed in data also to the Soil Navigator for assessing the soil functions. So this soil monitoring framework consists of managing and monitoring soil multifunctionality across Europe. That was determined to be possible. Another conclusion is that we have synergies and trade-offs between soil functions, and that makes it difficult to maximize the supply of all these soil functions simultaneously. And also that synergies and trade-offs between the different soil functions may vary by climatic zone and also land use type. Especially the climate regulation, biodiversity and nutrient cycling is less frequently delivered at high capacity, whereas the other soil functions were easier to achieve optimum capacity by management practices. Then the last pillar we had here was that we actually developed 11 policy briefs describing different policy tools for functional soil management, where I would say that most of them would have relevance also for soil health, some more than others. But we have, for example, here the organic soils, how to manage the organic soils, and how to navigating the soil functions, how to get the most soil functions out of the land. And here I see also our definition of soil functions very much in line with also improving overall soil health. So these 11 policy briefs are also available at the Landmark website. So finally, my thoughts on how ideas for how to collaborate on further projects is, of course, very much focused on the Soil Navigator, because this is what I worked on. So we are also investigating already options for developing Soil Navigator for agroforestry. Integrating also economics into the Soil Navigator has been also a request by some of the users. Extending the Soil Navigator to include other climatic zones and crops. I presented the tool here at the Climate Smart Agriculture Conference in Bali back in 2019. There was a huge interest from many representatives from developing countries. But also really to go in and exploit the Soil Navigator to optimize soil health and provide suggestions for regenerative agriculture management practices to do that. Finally, we also had the idea to apply Soil Navigator for documenting soil health benefits of management practices that could then make potentially farmers eligible for payment for ecosystem services in a future revision of the CAP. So I think that was my short introduction here.
Thank you very much, Christian. And we move to the last project presentation of today, which comes from Mr. Angelo Basile, representing Land Support. So please, Angelo, the floor is yours.
I'm here. So thank you, Anka. Good morning to everybody. I'm Angelo Basile from Italian National Council of Research. I am a co-leader of the project. I will present this land support project. Anka, next slide, please. So here are the main numbers of the project. We are almost at the end, in the end of the project. We have 5 months of work. It's a Horizon 2020 project, more or less 7 million euro. There are many countries and partners involved. Our overall primary objective is the development of many tools in a web-based, open access and completely free geospatial decision support system that is devoted for supporting sustainable agriculture, supporting sustainable forestry, for evaluating trade-off between different land uses, and for contributing to the implementation of land use policy in Europe, like Common Agricultural Policy or Nitrate Directive, and so on. Next slide, please. So what about the soil health in land support? So first of all, the premise. So we believe that soil health, because soil health change over time following different land use, especially management, but also natural process like erosion. In our opinion, indicator of soil health should have a dynamic component in certain way. Our approach is to use the modeling, specifically physically based modeling, to perform soil water balances, crop growth, carbon and nitrate balance. So which are the main product of our project in respect to soil health? We have developed this web platform that is freely available, where each end user can easily, according, for example, to the crop, to the type of climate, calculate in few steps the soil health status of the soil of interest. So which is the main idea about the progress and the concept of soil health? We move from the current definition of the soil health, that is the continued capacity of a soil to support ecosystem services. That means that if this is true, if this is the definition, we cannot, we have to connect every time ecosystem services and soil health. So this cannot be separated. In our opinion, the modeling can be a viable way to take this connection very tight. Next slide, please, Anka. So this is an example how we can do this in land support. On the left, there is a model that performs a water balance, but you can use a model also for crop growth or also nitrate balance and so on. So on the blue box, there is the ecosystem services calculation. So we can run the model according to the soil function. We can produce some indicator of ecosystem services. For example, about for the water purification, we can use the soil filtering capacity. For the production, of course, the yield and so on. This, for a specific soil, a soil series, for example, can be a reference ecosystem services indicator of that soil. So it's the optimum that we can reach. From the other point, from the same model, we can calculate the current status of the soil, for example, after degradation. So, for example, an erosion or a compaction and so on. So we can rate the current status of ecosystem services, you see in the red box, respect the reference status that we have previously calculated. This, in our opinion, is an index of soil health of the current status respect the maximum obtainable. This can be done for several ecosystem services. Maybe with the same model, it's possible to combine several. And in the end, we can also calculate a global index of soil health that in our case is just an example of the sum, but we can use also several other type of global index combining this each individual index of soil health. And that's all from my side, Anka.
Thank you, Angelo. And I'd like to thank all the presenters for being here with us today and also for presenting their project. And in respect of time, if there are no urgent questions now, perhaps we can move to the keynote speeches and then we can address any questions that may arise during the discussions. So I give the floor back to Fabio. Fabio, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, let me thank, it was really impressive for me to see all this effort, energy, all of us are doing towards the soil. And of course, thanks for all this interaction. I had many questions, but I would suggest, you see the agenda here, since we will have enough time for discussion to keep going. We will allow firing question from myself. I will speak now, but also the keynote one. Keynote 2 is pre-recorded, so the guy is not there because of the time lag from New York. So we will just broadcast his contribution. But what I want to say, after the coffee break, we can open, in the open discussion, we can go back on some question to some of you, because I think we were exposed to many different approaches. So it's very nice to start this interaction, of course, to go back on some of the questions we have risen. So I start my presentation, and then again, we proceed as we said.
Fabio,
Yes?
Angelo is speaking. Because we are a little bit on delay, maybe the coffee break can be anticipated after your talk. What do you think?
Yeah, it's okay. I think maybe, yes, this is a good
Otherwise,
idea.
we are a little bit tired.
Yes, okay. It's so we shall go in that direction. So I start with my presentation. Let's say that I oblige myself, if you like, to give, because of course we all know that there are very different visions. So in order to create some concrete roots basis, I thought that I had to undertake a kind of, I call it comparative approaches and vision. So I made this homework in the last days for today. Basically, if we go back on all the huge number of papers, apart from your contribution, the one I showed at the beginning of the day, basically all these papers make reference to some kind of indicators. Of course, some indicator refers to soil parameters like clay pH, clay content, some to processes like mineralization rate or an infiltration process, some other to soil function like water retention, for instance, some others with the primary productivity. But as we heard from Luca Montanarella, but basically it's the same from the soil mission, because the definition, you know, we have two definitions, one from the Soil Mission Board and now one from the Soil Thematic Strategy, but they resemble in a sense that they all make huge reference to soil ecosystem services. So, of course, we need, as has been said, each of those indicators could try to have a connection. But let's dive a bit in what that does it mean, especially for those of you we have maybe less experience on these parameter process properties. So I start to show this famous diagram from Agard in 2009 about ecosystem services. And you see primary productivity, climate regulation, water storage, nutrient cycling, etc. So what it means to basically create an indicators, or anyway to have indicators of processes, features, etc. So we must start really from soil. So if I take the example of water storage, of course, the water storage of this entire pattern, this entire soil, depends by the layering, by the different horizons, and basically, so I could get indirectly an information which is not water storage, but as some connection, which depends by the site, maybe the clay content, bulk density, soil depth, or on process, for instance, pore development after wetting and drying, or soil function, for instance, soil water retention curve of each of those layers are important. But eventually, of course, the water storage is can be measured, of course, in a specific moment, or can be modeled. And in this case, the real soil ecosystem services we are looking for is this guy here, which of course depends by precipitation, vegetation, evapotranspiration, pores, etc., etc. So this is why, of course, most of this guy up here comes from lab analysis. Here there is lots of simulation modeling. So this is just to clarify a bit the items. So if we dive in, I think this publication, Buneman 2018, is very enlightening. We have plenty of indicators. Some of those are here. Some refers to properties, some to function. You see a number of earthworm here, micronutrients, and yes, lots of hydrological properties. So in the green are biological indicator, red chemistry based, and blue is physically based. As you can see, chemistry has, of course, the huge importance. The biological base at 2018 were much lower. I must also add that the last 4 years, thanks to soil biologists, lots of work has been done in changing this scenario. But what is interesting that really none of those directly or indirectly really refers to ecosystem services. So we are way behind what the policies require from us. So my question was, how can we bring to you and analyze this different approach and vision on soil health? So basically, I decided to use the conceptualization by Bauma in '99, some years ago. Basically, for other types of modeling, he separate empirical versus mechanistic and qualitative versus quantitative. So I thought this was especially important for this case. So I will use this conceptualization of Bauma that I think is very nice, at least from my viewpoint, also in this specific case. So K1 are basically model on best, expert evaluation. So a kind of tacit knowledge. K2 refers to here, which are qualitative but mechanistic, with expert estimation about the mechanism, like in the case of land evaluation approach of FAO, multi-criteria analysis. K3 refers to empirical but quantitative, like artificial intelligence, neural network, things like that. K4 and K5 have an increasing, are quantitative, but an increasing amount of mechanistic approach. So if I use this conceptualization, of course, in order to handle soil health, this is not sufficient. I must also see how this conceptualization works and how our modeling works from farm, from point-based observation, region, country, and global. So I have used this approach, and but why giving so much importance mechanistics versus empirical, qualitative and quantitative? Everybody understand. Well, I think there is much more confusion between mechanistic and empirical. So in order to say why are we bothering with this issue, which may seem, I have really to rely on one of the paper, which this was done in 2009, where there was a comparison between it, just an example of there are other contributions about empirical versus mechanistic approaches, and also standard soil mapping versus digital soil mapping. But I will focus on the first one here. The author compare many different approaches, 9 with the increasing, let's say, mechanistic approaches. And to make this long story very short, you see here some performance indicator and the cost, and this different approach with an increasing mechanistic base. I go directly to the conclusion. Here it's very clear that empirical models require larger calibration, have lower transferability. Then for each new area, we need lots of new data. Mechanistic model provide data that are available. Once calibrated and validated, requires much less effort in transferability. You still need, of course, new data, but much less. Then for each new area, you need much less data. So this is crucial, and it uses as a background for the example I give it to you. So I will show to you some examples which are selected by myself, so are not exhaustive. but just to give basic general idea. And I start with the K1, so this expert qualitative approach, quoting a very fascinating contribution at last Eurosoil by this farmer who was invited, Frederick Thomas. He clarified that for soil health, we need very simple and visual tools, and he gave much importance to self-evaluation and monitoring qualities and functionality of soils. So, like a pH test that the farmer can do by himself, or infiltration tests. This was another case. A third really funny one that I want to show to you is the rate of degradation of underwear in the soil. So basically in no-tills, there was much stronger degradation than in conventional one. So this gives you a bit originality. Maybe it's a joke, of course, but it's a connection joke or something really happening. And this is important. Let's not forget this farmer perspective. And a second one I want to show to you, then it's a K2 example. This is a soil quality rating, very much used in Germany, actually, and very similar to fair land evaluation. Those are the indicators that are being used. At the end of the game, you end up with a very poor, moderate, good, very good. But soil health is very close to, to this soil quality, sorry, is very close to the soil health has been defined. So if I plot these two examples, of course, the farmer is here. It's just work at farmer scale, but you can see, and it mostly refers to soil parameters like pH, some soil processes. Then here we have the soil quality rating system, which address some soil properties, soil process, a bit soil function, and of course is really thought to go in that direction. But let's move to other examples. One very well known, it's this kit like Bifunk tool, where there are a few publications on the use of it. Basically, the principle is to evaluate some function of soils, like some more chemical, like nutrient cycling, one more related with biological, like carbon transformation, and one more with the physics, structure, maintenance. So those are these tests. These tests then are aggregated after principal component analysis to produce some weight, and eventually to produce a soil health index, which depends by how those guys are important. And here you see the comparison between conventional tillage and conservation agriculture under two different scenarios. So this is K3. So another NK3 is about, here, because in this specific case, it works at farm scale, but as you could see, moves towards soil function. But let's move to the huge initiative on soil health. Most of those refer really to the states. And of course, the one from the Soil Health Institute are very important. It's a huge kind of organization, and they claim that they are producing something towards indicator at continental scale. And they have a huge number of, not a huge, but a large number of indicators, some more chemistry oriented or physics like here. Not very much ecosystem services. You see here crop yield, but these crop yield are historical or actually measured data directly in the field. And but you have also a large set of more biological based indicator like enzyme activity, etc. So they combine all those, of course, to produce soil health indicator. What is important to tell in this case to Marta, who is here for European Commission, that this project receives, of course, an important amount of resources to spread the word, if you like. This was an award of 9.4 million US dollars, but just to say that there is a strong pressure and to somehow widespread these approaches. A different approach we shall hear together after the coffee break is this one from Cornell University. This is we shall hear from Vanessa, so I will go very quickly. Just to say that also this approach strongly rely on physics, biological and chemical indicators are many of these systems. Here you see some of these indicators with respect to soil processes, but again, we shall hear in a moment. What is important that also in this case, you weight these factors and according to some, you get some rating. The green, dark green is the best soil quality, 100, and the red, the worst, and the other one are in between. So the crucial things to say that in order to make this system work, we need a very large number of samples. So there is a quite important investment or organization. Similar approach to this K3 is the one from Wales, from ERA-MP. Basically, if I take these figures from this countryside survey done by Emmett et al. Some years ago, you can see here a series of indicators. So this is a European case. About this indicator, it's fascinating that some of those refers to soil invertebrates. So a more, not just a measure in the lab, and are a bit more complex. What is nice of these approaches, of course, that they can they go back on the same place, and of course they can measure the change in this case of topsoil organic carbon or pH. So it's not very different from what Luca was speaking about the new Lucas. And then you can order this information like the change of topsoil organic carbon in different land uses. And what is very fascinating about this specific project is the ability to bring together the soil health approach, the way they call for topsoil, with many other completely different indicators like birds, pollinators, and so forth. So if we bring all these things together, those mostly refers to soil parameters, soil properties, and they go to a much larger scale with a huge quantity of samples. And in the case of Soil Health Institute, they claim they're still working on that they can reach even up higher. So let's move to K4 approaches, the more mechanistic. I gave those are two work by Bonares, by Vogel et al. Basically, they also evaluate soil function, but these soil function are very close, some of those to soil ecosystem services. That depends by a series of soil attributes. Some are inherent, other are affected by soil management, so close to the vision of Johan about genoform and phenoforms, and they weight actually this system, and this is an example of the weighting in order to produce an indicator, which are here, which is the sum of this inherent soil condition and soil management. So this is operational and has a bit higher mechanistic approach to the one we have seen, but not yet modeling. We have some modeling arriving, but not yet in place by Bonares. It will come in next year, so I will not talk very much about this one, and neither about the one from Biosis, which is more biological oriented, connecting, for instance, biological activity with some physics like water storage. So we will hear about these two things in next years to come. So if I bring their perspective, you can see that we are about K4, between K4 and K3. Bonares, the one I showed, this one I will not discuss again because I'm not yet ready. But of course, on this, I have to show to you our approaches by our group with the help of Johan, where we use simulation models and mainly to derive one ecosystem services, which is biomass production. Angelo already said something about it, so I will be very quick. As Angelo said, we make a comparison between yield, for instance, of a soil, imagine after land degradation, with respect to the same soil as a reference. Without such land degradation, we do this ratio by physically based modeling. And so I go just to this specific picture where we see this ratio I showed, which connect to soil quality. And those are 3 different soils. I will focus only on reference climate, not on climate change, because the story is already too complex. But the more the soil is close to 100%, the more resilient is its soil health. The more it can decrease, the less resilience is the soil health of the soil. So basically, this is an example of how can be measured soil health with this physically based approach. So in this specific case, you see, is actually the only one we could encounter. Although, I mean, Bonares had some soil ecosystem service, but this is fully devoted to ecosystem services. So this is the approach we are going towards. So if I bring all these things together, what is important that you know that I make this difference between, you see, the mechanistic with higher transferability, I put bold line, empirical with the lower transferability, very shallow one. And if I put everything we have discussed together, you have these scenarios where you have, of course, the strongest project up high, but a very tiny line, which means that every time we need transferability, it's really an issue, while I think are coming slowly, rather slowly, I must say, but are coming this physically based modeling, which according to us have a strong power. But this is not, of course, still questioning where to go. So I will go to final remark. So we have seen the large importance of benchmark empirical approach, because for the moment, those are the one which are the dominant in the environment of soil health, but we have seen also some weakness. They need really very large data sets and weak transferability to new areas, while we have seen the importance of physically based approach, lower data set, high transferability, closer to evaluate ecosystem services, because you have already modeling produced those which are physically based. So this is important, but they are weak. We have too little research, not many papers, and the focus for the moment is more focused on yield production rather than anything else. So let me conclude saying that there is really a need for a large research effort to shed some light in this vast mix of approaches and indicators. We must be very lay between this contrasting approach. So we don't need just mapping of existing knowledge. And of course, Living Lab and Lighthouses are really important, but not enough. We need to do something more. We need original research. And I go back on some of the issues. One, for instance, is we need the new approaches, new testing to solve some of our problems, because we still have problems. One was highlighted, and I'm very happy, by Stefano, and I liked also myself here, the problem of temporal and spatial variability of some indicator, for instance, some biological, very strongly, very important, but bloody variable in space. But another one I want to say is the strong criticism on the scientific literature on some of which are considered really benchmark indicators, between them pursue aggregate stability that you find basically everywhere. And to show what I mean here, I mean this one, this is for instance a soil thin section from a soils. This is about 3 centimeters wide. You see the soil pore network, from which depends many of the ecosystem services. Imagine water retaining this soil and many other things, biological activity. Of course, in the case of aggregate stability, we sieve all these organization, and on the base of the aggregates after sieving, we try to reconstruct how ecosystem services work. So this is also why Vogel in this work very recently basically consider lots of doubt about the importance of aggregate stability. But apart from this paper, we need really to dive in to understand what is useful and what not. So the other final things we must also clarify. What is the target of soil health? Is soil health gaps or threshold, as Luca suggests in the introduction, that like is done by the Soil Health Institute, or peer groups? And of course, to quantify trade-off between approaches. And finally, we cannot just understand. Understanding is not enough. We need to develop operational approaches also for farmers who want to self-test, for instance, what is happening in soil health in their own domains. And sorry for long, but I thought it was very important to give you this overall view before our discussion. So I stop here, and maybe we could allow, if there are some firing questions, then we postpone also my presentation afterwards.
Coffee now, I understand.
Yes, okay, we do coffee now. So we come back, let's say we can do, yes, we said 20 minutes originally.
11:40.
11:40. Okay, we can keep at 11:40. You can remain on this, yes, here on Zoom, and we start again at 11:40. Thank you for now, and we meet soon.
Yeah.
Hi, Johan. May
Hello.
you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
I'm Antonello, Johan.
Hello. Good to hear you. Well, let's see what happens, huh?
I am in the car in this moment.
Say that again. Huh?
I'm follow from car this
Okay.
moment. Okay. I am with the family.
Okay.
How you feel?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing all right. Yeah, sure. Yeah, fortunately, that's quite good. How about yourself?
No, I'm a little bit better. Also, the babies that had some health problems in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what you said, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's normal when they go at school, no?
Yeah, right. Do they still go at school, or are the schools closed in Italy now?
No, the schools are open.
They're open.
Today, yes, open. Only in these 2 days they are closed, but because it's an holiday day.
Mm-hmm.
Just for this.
Okay.
Okay, it was very pleasure for me to see you. You only met by me, and then I found you very well. I'm so happy for you.
Very good, very good, very good. Oh, we'll be in touch. Yeah.
Okay, I will continue to hear this meeting. That is very interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot going on, huh? There's very much going on. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great work of Fabio.
Yeah.
Okay. See you.
Okay.
I'm hear you. Bye. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Johan.
Acknowledge my co-speaker. Fund. It's great for the labs. It's big business for a laboratory, but it's not operational. It's too expensive.
Hey, hallo. Johan, dag.
Yes, yes.
Hoi. Ik zie dat jij ook online bent. De rest zit nog koffie te drinken. Maar...
Ja. Help even, met wie spreek ik op het ogenblik? Want ik zie geen hoofd.
Jacques Faber.
Oh, Jacques Faber. Ja, ik hoorde net je presentatie. Ja. Nee, leuk.
Ja. Hey, mag ik jou wat vragen?
Ja, uiteraard.
In de laatste documenten van de Soil Mission Board, daar wordt gesproken over soil health, maar niet meer over soil quality. De hele term wordt niet gebruikt.
Nee, die term is überhaupt, ook in Amerika wordt er nauwelijks meer over gesproken. En dat is heel verwarrend voor veel mensen, hoor. Dus in die ene paper waar Fabio ook net naar refereerde, proberen we ook die twee dingen even uit elkaar te halen. Wat jij trouwens ook deed, hoor. En dat moeten we wel doen. En omdat het wekt verwarring naar buiten toe. Maar soil health is now the name of the game. En nou ja, je moet er maar mee, go with the flow, zeg ik dan maar. Maar het is een goed punt. Ja, het is een goed punt.
Ja, oké. Goed. Ik voelde me op een gegeven moment een beetje... er kwam wat twijfel bij me op, omdat ik denk van... dat onderscheid maken is heel nuttig, maar... als de flow de andere kant op gaat, dan voel je je op een gegeven moment een beetje een roep in de woestijn of zo.
Dat klopt. Dat moet je zien te voorkomen. Ja, nee, dat is helemaal waar. Prima, nou, het is 20 voor de... Ik hoop dat er nog mensen over zijn, eerlijk gezegd. Want, we zullen zien. Nee, ik heb...
Switch to English.
Switch to English, yeah, right.
Okay. So I think it's time to start again. And yes, I will leave questions in the discussion. I will leave the floor to Johan Baumann and Antonello Bonfante, but Johan will present. Of course, I remember that Johan is emeritus professor of soil science. Wageningen University is acting as an officer of the Soil Mission Board. So thank you for being here, Johan. And the floor is yours. I do not know whether you, for possibly Anke. Yes, Anke will share.
Yeah, they will load it up. So here we are. Well, good morning, everybody. This presentation is called The Role of Soil Health in the Soil Deal for Europe, referring to the important note by the European Commission on 29.9. And I co-present this with Antonella Bonfante from CNR in Italy. Next, yeah. Well, I think one of the key points, and this has been mentioned already this morning, of the note in September on the missions was that the note emphasizes the establishment of 100 living labs and lighthouses to lead the transition to healthy soils by 2030. That's a key element. And the definition of living labs, there's quite a bit of discussion on that, but what we quoted in our mission report is that they are spaces for co-innovation through participatory, transdisciplinary, systemic research. And that can very well be a farm or a group of farms on a given soil type in a given region with a given management system, for example. Now, lighthouses show successes obtained in terms of achieved sustainable development goals. That's my interpretation anyway. Now, communities and stakeholders are at the center of the innovation process, and that's quite clear from the European Commission note. And we have to create soil stewardship. We saw many very nice examples this morning of this very fact. So this is not just a plan, this is already happening in many cases. It's very important to start with the stakeholders, and that's particularly farmers because they use by far most of the land. But it's not only farmers, that was also mentioned this morning. Other land users are very important as well. But because of time, I will focus mainly on the farmers now from now on. There is a big need. This came up very clearly this morning. Marta mentioned it, Luca mentioned it, others mentioned that there's a big need for effective internal and external communication. That can mean development of decision support systems, which we saw in land support. We saw other examples this morning, and that's a very important element of the overall effort, applying modern communication insights. We have to realize that the communication has dramatically changed in only 10 years. The social media are only 10 years or maybe 13 years old, and it's a new ball game, and we have to adjust to that. Yes? Now, the important stakeholders are the farmers. Now, it's very important to focus on what their opinions are and what their concerns are. And there are numerous studies. I pick out three elements that, first of all, the economic concerns are on top. Results will only be obtained when based on sound business plans. We have to remember that, be realistic. And remember, in many cases, what is good for the environment may also be good for business. Look at precision farming, where you save costs and you have less environmental side effects. Just one example, there are many others. The second thing is that they have complaints about complex environmental and sometimes illogical rules and regulations in their field. There are no clear goals, and farmers need clear goals in order to invest. They make investments for long periods of time. That's a real problem. And what they also mention in many cases is lack of independent advice, and particularly unclear prospects for the future. The Landmark program has really contributed a lot to these various results in interaction with farmers. Now, let's realize, and this has been mentioned already this morning several times, that modern farmers are like jugglers. They have to produce healthy food, the Sustainable Development Goals 2 and 3, protect ground and surface water quality, SDG 6, conserve energy, SDG 7, support climate mitigation by carbon capture and reduction of greenhouse gas emission, SDG 13, and protect life on land by soil conservation and by enhancing biodiversity, all at the same time, which is an immense challenge, to say the least. Next. Now let's briefly discuss these items of concern, the economic concerns. Now, as has been mentioned this morning, the CAP has been approved now, and there's a lot of money involved, as we all know, and 25% is allocated to activities achieving ecosystem services aimed at sustainable development. And that 25% will likely increase in future. Now, another thing is that national governments will have to implement new measures in line with general criteria of the CAP. There's a lot of flexibility there, which I think is very good. We have to realize that the market fails to provide realistic prices for the farmer. Fierce competition by the supermarket chains, for one thing. So society should pay for the fact that, how's that now? Okay, the screen is now, Angelo's, yeah. For the fact that farmers can provide essential ecosystem services to society. Water quality, carbon capture, biodiversity preservation, and we should realize that the CAP is not a subsidy, but a payment for. Next. Now, consider the second element, no clear goals and unclear prospects. Farmers are now confused by a wide variety of proposed management systems that are fiercely promoted on internet and social media. Biological, organic, biologic dynamic, circular, nature inclusive, regenerative, high-tech precision, and others. Now, this can be quite inspirational, and don't get me wrong. I think this is good stuff, but it is confusing for farmers because whether or not a given system is sustainable depends on whether or not systems meet indicators and thresholds for the various ecosystem services. I think that has been brought out already clearly this morning. And providing them will provide clarity. In addition, the contribution of soils to these ecosystem services is again defined by indicators and thresholds for soil health, to be discussed later. And the name of the game is the healthier the soil, the better. Next. Now, soil health, to be considered as a key element in the soil deal for Europe, has been defined by our mission as the continued capacity of soils to contribute to ecosystem services in line with the SDGs and the Green Deal. I think this link with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is very important. And the Green Deal fits closely to the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals were approved in 2050 by 193 governments, and this puts the whole story in an international framework, which I think is important. There is a main message, though, in my view. Soils nor any other separate scientific discipline can do it alone. Okay, that's true for agronomy, it's true for hydrology, it's true for a lot of other professions. We cannot do it alone. We have to work in an interdisciplinary context. And the key question is, how can all disciplines together contribute to the needed systems analysis? And I strongly feel that modeling of the soil, water, atmosphere, plant system is then an excellent vehicle for inter and transdisciplinary research, as will be shown. And in that sense, I agree with what Fabio was saying about that. I just quickly show this figure from our publication in 2016, where we have soil science in the middle, then we have the soil functions. And as Luca was saying, the soil functions were already defined in 2006. That's a disciplinary part. Then you have the ecosystem services. Soils contribute to ecosystem services, and they in turn contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can, every Sustainable Development Goal, there's a link with soil, but we have to focus probably on a few where it is most prominent. Next. So there are two key points when enhancing the desirable soil stewardship, at least two key points. We have to truly engage and listen to farmers and other land users. We report that 30 to 70% of soils in Europe are degraded in various ways. They're not healthy. But if we are honest, we know what to do about it after decades of research. And the advice is not widely followed. That's the conclusion we have to draw. So we have a serious communication problem. And the living labs can create better engagement, where researchers and farmers work together in a broader context, communicating with outside society. And the second point is, we have to provide objective and realistic goals for the future, a quote, point at the horizon, unquote. And this is lacking now. And I feel that ecosystem services in line with the SDGs and the Green Deal have a clear function by providing such goals. Next. Now, after approval of the missions, the new CAP, the new farm to fork plans of the European Union with the SDGs and the Green Deal in the background, and the new bulletin of the European Union of 17 November we heard about this morning, the research community has to come up with, first of all, operational procedures to assess ecosystem services and the role of soils in contributing to such services, and two, effective ways to communicate results of living lab research. Now, if the scientific community does not deliver, and again in a co-learning mode with the stakeholders, bureaucrats will be forced to prepare land use policies without this know-how. And they will do it, they have to do it, okay? And that is second best, at best, as far as I'm concerned. Next. Now, what are these ecosystem services? Contributing to various SDGs to be realized with proper soil management, but broader management by the farmer. There are 5 of them. They refer to the same SDGs I talked about before. I will not read all of them. They have been mentioned many times before this morning. And what we need are indicators and also thresholds. That was mentioned a few times this morning. That's very right. Separate the good from the not good enough for each ecosystem services and on living lab level. I think that's a little bit the name of the game now, with the living labs being put up front. We have a living lab, and then what? What are we going to do? What are we going to measure in such a way that it is operational, in such a way that you get results that may be helpful also for legislation in future, okay? And we have a wealth of information now, listening to all these impressive presentations this morning. So focus it on a given living lab, no generalities, very specific, and have a lot of living labs representing different soils, different management systems, and so on and so forth. Now, that's already happened for the SDG 6 by the European Water Framework Directive, where nitrate and phosphate concentrations are defined for ground to surface water as thresholds, also with thresholds, the measurement of nitrogen and phosphate, including the thresholds. It will also happen, I'm sure, for all these other ecosystem services. And we better be ahead of the game with the research community to feed that with realistic data rather than have force the bureaucrats to come up with something, okay? Now, I would like to say more about methods to measure and to determine thresholds, but the 15 minutes is not enough for that. I just want to say that in many cases, existing methods are not quite adequate, so we need additional work on that. And one thing I feel is important to use proximal and remote sensing data and modeling on farm level. The modeling will also be important, but there are examples of that, but time does not allow that. The next slide shows, for example, an example how greenhouse gas emissions can now be measured with satellites. There's just one example, methane. There are other examples, and I know that the European Space Agency is really working on refining those methodologies that are very important in future for the monitoring. Next. Now, in addition to remote sensing of greenhouse gases and crop production levels, modeling of the soil, water, atmosphere, plant system is important to assess ecosystem and soil health indicators. I feel it also allows exploration of climate change, which is essential for the future because big changes will occur. And of course, you cannot measure in the future, that's obvious. So that's where the modeling comes in handy. And one thing I would like to emphasize, I have not heard that very much this morning. It seems that each soil type acts differently. Each soil type has a story to tell, and it's up to us to articulate that story, okay? The ranges of organic matter content in different soils are quite different, for example, just as an example. And I think that's also a challenge to the pedology environment, the people that work on soil formation and soil maps and all those kind of things, to link up with this new direction towards the soil health implementation. Next. Just quickly, this slide indicating the effects of one of these IPCC figures that large areas of the world will be substantial drops in production because it will be too dry and too hot. In our areas, it will be better, but still the dry periods will be longer. The rain will be more intense. You know the stories. And we have a major challenge to feed 9.7 billion people by 2050. That's, I guess, we can all agree on. And that's a big cloud on the background in this whole story. Next. Just want to show this figure from Antonella did this. Fabio also showed an example of that. 3 different soil types, A, B, and C. You see on the left side of each diagram, you see 4 columns. First is the calculated production, then the production when you add organic matter to it. The third one is when you have 20 centimeter of erosion, and the fourth one is when you have a plow pan. You see a big effect. You see also when you go to the right, you see the climate for in 2070, 2100. You see that the effects are going to be stronger there, but you see also for different soils, the graphs are quite different. That's what I meant, that every soil has a story to tell, and together with empirical knowledge by all means, but the modeling can also help to articulate and to get some numbers on these various aspects. Next one, please. Now, how about soil health? Soil contributing to ecosystem services. There are a number of indicators proposed for soil health, where by our mission board, and we say, well, let's talk to the roots. What do the roots like to have to develop well? Because that's really determining a healthy soil will be most favorable to the rooting environment. There are 6 of them, and we also want to emphasize that we need operational, rapid, and relatively cheap measurement and monitoring methods that can also be used by the farmer. Preferably, we had a very nice demonstration of that this morning. And one of the problems in America, in American system indicators, is they have 20 to 30 indicators and requiring a lot of laboratory measurements. It takes a lot of time. It is very expensive. And we really wonder whether that's going to work, and we should not emphasize operational methods. And we need really to look at the methods. because, for example, in a case study now we find that current methods for bulk density and organic matter determination are not only expensive and time consuming, but they show very high variations because samples are often too small. With just one example, so we need more work on that, and proximal sensing could perhaps help with that. So these are the indicators for soil health contributing to ecosystem services that in turn contribute to the SDGs. Next. Next, please. Now, I wrap up. First of all, sustainable development in agriculture will only be achieved when farmers adopt management measures. You could extend that to say when land users adopt management measures that will result in ecosystem services that contribute to achieving the land-related SDGs and the goals of the Green Deal. That way we link up with the international concept. 2, define and measure indicators for each ecosystem service and for soil health, working in living labs aiming for lighthouses. We are at a living lab. What are we going to do? What are we going to measure? And we have lots of methods already we can test out, right? 3, define thresholds for ecosystem services and for soil health indicators, separating good from not good enough. And I emphasize not good enough. I'm not saying bad, not good enough, because we can improve it, right? That will have to vary by soil and region. Develop decision support systems and modern communication systems to assist the co-design and spread the word. Very important. And finally, develop a relatively simple system for evaluation of individual farms, living labs. That's the name of the game. That can be applied in practice and can be the basis for innovative management and soil stewardship using simple innovative measuring techniques and modeling of the soil water atmosphere plant system. Indeed, a great challenge for the future, but it's worth it because we work on very important things for the future of the Earth, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. Always very inspiring. Any firing question for Bauma?
I snowed them.
Do not be shy.
Very convincing presentation, I guess.
Okay.
I have a question for Johan. Johan, but concerning your statement about to separate what is good from what is not good, so you mean that we have to provide indicators, local indicators at a small scale. Otherwise, if we use a general indicators, doesn't work for different soil, climate, region
right.
in Europe. It's correct, my interpretation?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Angelo. I think this probably should be filled in regionally. It should not be different for every farm, because then it's not going to work. But I think regionally, look at climate zones, look at a given region, you should probably define that. And we also have to look at differences between soils. I still think there's quite a bit of opportunity to start with the soil type and say what kind of possibilities are there, what are the ranges and the values, the threshold values. Look at organic matter, for example. It's the ranges of organic matter as a function of management are characteristically different for different soils. So you could also use the soil type as a means to stratify whatever has to be done. But this is obviously something that has to be figured out, and having a set of these living labs, I think that's a very good way to start. And this is one of the items that has to be discussed, no doubt. Yes.
Okay. A quick question by Jack and a quick answer by you. Jack.
Thank you, Fabio. Johan, when you mention the social development goals, there's ecosystem services associated to that. But there's many, many more ecosystem services that could be included as well. And I wonder if there's about 40 different ecosystem services that are affected by agricultural management. And actually you are implicitly talking about just a selection of that.
Right.
Would you define soil health in terms of the agriculturally related services or wider?
Yeah, good question. As I mentioned, I focus most on agriculture because farmers use the highest amount of land. So, but the rest is also very important. And the diagram I showed, diagram that Saskia Kestra made in 2016, shows that behind the soil functions, you have the ecosystem services, and you have all the SDGs that cover all these issues, that cover everything, you can say, socioeconomic as well. And when you talk about agriculture, I just decided to take the major ones. Why? Because one of the biggest problems, challenges, I should say, we have is that we are drowning in data. You know, if you want to cover everything, you just you don't survive, right? So first things first, and certainly when looking at the living labs, I would also be really an advocate to start out quick and dirty, if you like, and say, now let's look at the major things and then make it more detailed after that. I think one challenge we have in science in general is that we start with all the details, with the second and the third decimals before you know it, and then we get lost. We lose the whole picture. So there's a very pragmatic approach to it as well. But you're quite right. We should not only look at farmers, we should look at all land users, and then the more ecosystem services are relevant. Taking these 5 I took is just pragmatic. They are very important for agriculture. That's basically it. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep your question just for the discussion, which is almost arriving. I will ask to Anka to broadcast the last keynote presentation by Harold Van Ness from Cornell University. This is important because, as we heard, basically in the States, there is, of course, this huge project. This is one of those. So it's very important also for our discussion to get a real feeling what are these projects about. Thank you, Anka, please.
Sorry, could I just come with a message?
Good morning, everyone.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Unfortunately, I will not be able to join the discussion afterwards. But I would just invite everybody who's interested in future collaboration on the Soil Navigator or other aspects of the Landmark project. You know, you are very welcome to contact me via email. I put the email in the chat here. I wish I could join the discussion, but I had unfortunately other obligations. So
okay, thank you very much. Anyway,
wish you a nice discussion. Hope to hear from you.
Okay,
bye.
Thanks. Okay, let's proceed.
My name is Harold Van Ness from Cornell University. I'm sorry I can't join you in real time. I appreciate the invitation, but it's probably the middle of the night when you are listening to me. So I'm going to be addressing the issue of measuring soil health to better understand and manage it, and show you some interesting results from our own work. So I'd like to start out by sort of giving you the diagrammatic perspective on soil health outcomes, which at the highest level is ecosystem services. They're supported by soil functions, and soil functions are supported by soil processes. And there are different ways we can measure these soil health outcomes at the very high level, maybe something like food production or water quality. Then we can measure soil functions like the ability to grow plants by indicators like crop yield. And then we can measure soil processes. And we can either do that directly by measuring parameters like infiltrability, but that's often time consuming and expensive, and very susceptible to variations in the field. So we often resort to indicators as a way to assess soil health. But before we go to that, I think it's often overlooked that there are a lot of data sources out there that can be used to assess soil health. For example, farmers measure yield with yield monitors, and that often gives them a yield map, which from their perspective is probably the most important soil health indicator. We can also use satellite images that are readily available, and it gives you indirect measurements, but it also gives you very important spatial perspective, which also might help with guiding sampling efforts. So when we think about measurements of soil health, there's a lot of considerations that involve selecting indicators that are most useful. So for example, how dynamic versus static is an indicator. If it's very static and doesn't change much due to, say, management, it's not as useful. But if it's too dynamic and it changes from week to week, that's also not very useful. For example, earthworm counts can be like that. What's, of course, the value relative to the cost of the measurement? Are we taking samples, or are we doing, on-the-go measurements using field equipment, or perhaps remote or proximal sensing? Are we interested in a universal set of indicators, or are we interested in specific production environments, like, for example, a soil health indicator set for orchards or cash grain systems? What's sort of the scale of the approach? And then how well do we align with other objectives like water quality, energy, greenhouse gases? Because many land managers have to have multiple objectives that they are pursuing in the sort of broader sustainability approach. So there's a lot of in-field measurements that we can make, and I'm sure you're all familiar with them and what they're trying to measure. I think one of the challenges with in-field measurements, although they can be very useful for educational purposes or to get some basic assessment, is that you have an issue with what is the best time to make the measurements, because you often can't do a single visit and measure all of these indicators, because some need to be measured at the beginning of the season or the middle of the season, or under moist conditions or wet conditions or dry conditions. And so that's one of the challenges that we have, but they can still be extremely valuable. And let's not forget that we can also ask the plant, and that's especially useful with the chemical issues. We know the nutrient deficiency symptoms can often be detected by assessing the plants either visually or using sensors, similar with compaction and salinity. Another approach is to have higher spatial resolution with tools like Veris, where you measure apparent electrical conductivity. You have an optical sensor that can assess organic matter and clay content. This tool has an on-the-go pH meter, of course, a very important indicator, as well as high precision GPS, which allows you to look at landscape features, curvature, and things like that. And in many cases, you can conduct additional soil sampling at strategic locations, and then using cross calibrations to interpret the sensor data and make it more useful. As an example, this is from one of my previous PhD students, Rintaro Kinoshita, where the EC data from the Veris tool allowed us to look at water holding capacity by finding cross correlations between the EC measurements and the actual measured 1 bar water contents, in this case, from strategically sampled soil material that was analyzed in the laboratory. So, okay, that gets us to the laboratory, and there's a whole bunch of indicators that are being promoted. I think when it comes to the chemical indicators, I think things are more settled because there's a decades-long history of measuring nutrients and pH and salinity and toxics. On the physical side, I think there's some convergence as well, that aggregate stability, plant available water especially, are quite useful, perhaps macroporosity and bulk density as well. I think in the biological area, there's some indicators, organic matter or organic carbon and nitrogen, are quite well established. Respiration and active carbon, or POC, are becoming more widely measured. And then we have a whole bunch of other indicators that are very promising, but there hasn't been a convergence yet on which ones should be more routinely measured. Perhaps eventually we're going to be focusing more on the molecular genetic profiling, as the cost of that is coming down. But I think we need to really work on interpretation schemes to for that to go to prime time. So at Cornell University, we developed the comprehensive assessment of soil health approach, which we launched with the Soil Health Laboratory now 15 years ago, because we wanted to offer practical soil health testing services to researchers and land managers. So we now have built up a considerable database that has been beneficial, and I'll come back to that later. But we have 4 physical indicators, 4 biological indicators, and then 7 chemical measurements, including 4 minor elements. And we, in the report, we provide the measured values, and then we interpret those through scoring functions, and we're using kind of a fuzzy peer group based approach, and I'll come back to that. We also give an overall soil quality score, although we'd like to focus more on where the problems are, and we provide texture information because it's needed to interpret the values, as you know. The cache approach, we selected the indicators, based on various criteria, including cost, but we also wanted to make sure that all relevant soil processes were represented by at least one indicator. So in that way, it truly is a comprehensive assessment of soil health. Now, in terms of the interpretation using scoring functions, we did some work recently with the USDA Agricultural Research Service and the University of Missouri to develop the so-called SHAPE approach, soil health assessment protocol evaluation, which is, again, a peer group-based assessment. So we're comparing a soil sample to soil samples from a peer group, and we're using the cumulative normal distribution approach, which is really a fuzzy logic approach, you might say. And we had a very large database to work from, and so based on soil texture, soil type, and mean annual temperature and precipitation, different scoring functions were developed using a Bayesian modeling approach. And just to illustrate that, here we have a mollisoil from Iowa compared to an iridosoil from Texas. So there are different peer groups. And so for the Iowa soil, an organic carbon content of 2% gives you a score of 0.5, but for the iridosoil, that 2% organic carbon gives you a score that's almost 1. So that's really, for those soils, that's really a relatively high level. Also, we did work looking at basically the value of each of the indicators. So because we did a comprehensive assessment, we have the overall soil health score. And then we did a best subsets analysis to see, with smaller subsets, how informative those indicators are. So if we measure only one indicator and we try to estimate the overall soil health, then POC or active carbon is the best indicator to measure. It's most predictive. If we measure 2 indicators, it's POC and organic matter, and then you can see here 3 and 4. So we have increasing, of course, predictability, but these are the most valuable indicators. We also were taking advantage of a long-term experiment in North Carolina, where we did an assessment of the cache approach in a long-term experiment that had different tillage systems, from very intense to basically a minimum till system. And so what you see in this graph is that as we decrease tillage intensity, we see an increase in active carbon, or POC, but we also can relate that to an increase in yield. Even though there was a lot of annual variability, the correlation with the mean yield is actually quite good. And so the same graphs I'm showing here for all these other indicators, and I ordered them, I ranked them by how good their fit was with yield. And we see that protein had the best correlations with corn yields, then POC, or active carbon, manganese because of the electron transfer associated with organic matter decomposition, and then respiration. So the most strongly related to yield were these indicators of labile, carbon, and nitrogen. Next, we have aggregate stability, phosphorus, magnesium, and then organic matter. But you see that organic matter actually had a much lower correlation with yield than these more labile carbon and nitrogen sources. So that's very interesting. We also used our database to focus on New York State, which is our home state, to look at inherent versus dynamic aspects of soil health. And probably Johan Baumann in the previous presentation talked about genoforms and phenoforms. So we use texture classification as the sort of inherent factor, and then we looked at cropping systems for the dynamic factor. And so we have annual grains, which is corn, soybean, wheat, and processing vegetables. In these cases, there's relatively little carbon and nutrient cycling because most of the biomass gets harvested and then gets moved off the field and off the farm where it's sold. With the dairy crop system, so say alfalfa, corn silage, and manure applications, as well as pasture systems, where of course there's very little disturbance and perennials. So there's a lot of recycling of carbon and nutrients in these cases. And then mixed vegetables are often organic operations that import a lot of carbon and nutrients, typically through compost or other materials. So one thing we wanted to look at is to what extent are these different indicators, organic matter, epoxy, protein, respiration, ag stability, and available water capacity, to what extent are they influenced by either the inherent factor, the texture, or the dynamic factor, which in this case is the cropping system. And you see that organic matter and available water capacity are mostly impacted actually by texture, organo-mineral bonding, etc. But protein, respiration, and ag stability are mostly impacted by cropping system and much less by texture. And epoxy is sort of equally impacted by both. So we're getting a lot of insights in terms of what we're measuring and how useful that is. You also see here the outcome of the different soil health measures relative to the cropping systems, and you see that annual grains and processing vegetables, where there's less carbon and nutrient cycling, typically has less favorable outcomes than the systems where there's more cycling, especially with pastures where there's also very limited disturbance. So disturbance and carbon and nutrient cycling appear to be very important factors. Finally, we use this database to establish aspirational soil health goals, which the state of New York is now asking us to establish as part of new soil health legislation. And so again, using a peer group approach, we say, you can't have the same soil health expectations for different cropping systems. So for the ones where there's more harvest and export of carbon and nutrients, the expectations would be lower in a peer group evaluation than the ones where there's a lot of carbon and nutrient cycling or maybe very limited disturbance. And so we established these aspirational health goals by texture class. This is just for the loam texture, as well as the different cropping systems. And we based that on the 75th percentile of our distribution. So some key summary points. We have some new insights. Soil health indicators are variably affected by inherent properties like texture or sort of more management or human impacts like cropping systems, carbon and nutrient cycling, and disturbance. And it appears that the labile carbon and nitrogen indicators are most responsive to management. And in terms of new metrics, we have sort of a new approach to interpreting soil health indicators using the SHAPE method. And we developed some aspirational soil health goals, at least for New York State, for different soil types and cropping systems. So I want to finish up by noting that if you're familiar with this book that I co-authored, it's really a handbook about soil health, and we just published the 4th edition. It's a new one, and it's available, of course, for free as download like in the past, or you can order it in print format. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good rest of the meeting.
Okay, so I think it was important to hear Vanessa. And let's jump directly towards the crucial part of the discussion. We don't have, we still have about 40 minutes. So I may start just saying whether we missed some hanging question for speakers. So maybe we can start from this one. And so let us know whether there are some questions we could address before going on the further points. Okay, I have maybe a couple of questions on myself, one for Jack. So when are we going to hear about this development you were quoting? You said in 1-2 months, but where? And these specific things for him. Then for Matthias, if he's there, since Circasa is over as far as understood, so what are the next steps that you envision? Then for Stelios, I didn't get, so you are in a unique position compared with us with this connection with China. So I want to hear from you, what is the extra power we may get in creating this connection? And yes, I stopped just one for Stefano, whether I didn't understand whether it was your soil biodiversity issue just on microbes, or you also incorporate some faunal activities. Sorry, be quick to this answer, but I thought to have, yes, to give you the opportunity at least to, yes. So Jack.
Yeah, the question is, when can you expect the outcome of the science project?
Or where shall we find out these results that you were highlighting, but you could not show to us?
Yeah, I'm sorry that I didn't show any results, but this will be a report to the HB Soil program, and it will be available after agreement by the funders.
Yeah, yeah. So on the web page, so we must connect on the web page in a couple of months.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say in January, end of January.
Maybe you could send a message to the mailing list to let us know. Okay, thank you.
Yes, will.
Matthias, so what are the next steps of Circasa? We missed that.
Yeah, thanks for this question. As I showed that one of the results, or one was to build a basis, an information base for an international research consortium. And I think this will be the next step to think about how will this look like, how to establish this, which will be the partners, and how will it be funded, so that we come together and reach out to, I think everyone is invited to join. It's not ready for promote the International Research Consortium, but I think we are working on it. To contact for further questions, I think it's Jean-François Susanna's team, if there are any questions or interest in it. And this will be the next, and we are quite optimistic that we can establish this.
Okay, thank you. So Stelios, is China an added value for us here in Europe? I mean, in engaging them, what is your opinion since you are working with them?
Well, we do have quite a lot of differences. We are two different cultures, not only from the societal part, but also on the scientific way of thinking and working, and of course, also with the problems that we have to deal. For example, in Europe, we are always, let's say, now the focus is on the soil biodiversity, how to deal with the pollution from microplastics. But in China, they do have some more serious problems. That there was also problems, issues for the Europe before 50 years. They have a heavy pollution in soils from heavy metals. with other industrial disposals. Something that is the added value is that they do have a very high level of expertise, especially in data analysis, because our part is not so the typical soil science, but it was from the data science applied to the soil sector. They are quite strong. They do have a lot of new technologies. Something that it is important is that although they do not have their data open, and it is very difficult to have this data even in a joint project, there are quite a lot of restrictions of sharing data between Europe and China, and also from their institutions to our institutions. I think that they gave us a lot of insights. They shared this data. We made a lot of joint papers, joint publications in conference in journal papers. And I think that we can train actually our algorithms with their data and to learn more about how we can apply these technologies to soil science.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Sarah, but this serious game mix-up, is it available for playing with it? I didn't understand. We cannot.
Yeah, I was about to add something about China, but yes. So the serious game, we are starting to build it. So the idea is that it will be available for anyone to try. We want to build something that is open source, and it's a prototype. So we're going to focus on a number of key issues that Living Labs are identifying. And also key purposes.
But is already there. I mean,
not there yet. We're building it. We started this year. So.
Okay. So let's.
Yeah. So yeah, we basically base the building of the serious game on the Living Labs work.
Okay.
The partners in the Living Labs are identifying.
Okay, I will interrupt you. You want to say something on China, Sarah?
Yeah, regarding China, we don't have partners in China, but one of our international advisors is a professor at South China Agricultural University, has extensive experience with FAO, and we found that there are a number of things that we actually don't know about China. It's so diverse, and we hear about the reforestation strategy or what they want to do with agroforestry, but there are actually a number of realities for some ethnic groups and some regions that are seriously linked to agroforestry and mixed farming, which is something that we don't necessarily associate with China. And that I found that was very interesting. I also agree with Stelios that they are highly qualified, like the partners we are, the colleagues we are working with. So I think for us, it's beneficial to also have this exchange with China.
Okay, thank you. Stefano, the story of microbes and pedofauna.
Yeah, Fabio, if you actually in Excalibur, we are addressing soil biodiversity dynamics at different scales. So of course we include microbes, but not just microbes, also microarthropods, nematodes, earthworms. So what we are trying to do is to analyze their interconnection and their link with soil properties. So this is why before monitoring soil biodiversity dynamics, we carefully characterize the soil chemical, physical, and pedological characteristics, both for linking its properties and features with the soil biodiversity, but also for having good indications for sampling, because this is another issue that might be considered between the methodological hot topics to be discussed and taken into consideration when addressing with this kind of studies, because there are a lot of biases, as I said before. So this is more or less what we are doing.
Okay, thank you. So let's keep going. I want to share some of the questions, but of course this discussion is not ready-made, so it's we shall build together. So I place here some, I think it's very clear. Marta and Luca, let us touch, and also Johan as a member of the Soil Mission Board, but let us touch how important is soil health. Okay, so the question is, we are here in a unique position because we represent all these projects, so this large consortium, each of us basically. And the question is, of course, is also open to YouTube chat in case Gloria, in case there are somebody placing question. But the question is, I put here some question, but let's have maybe a round. So can we really help in this soil health? Because it's a big policy expectation. I mean, we are such policy we have only in Europe giving to soil health such a huge, no? We are also in a unique situation. And the fact that we don't have such huge system like the one we have shown of the Soil Health Institute and Cornell University has a disadvantage, but also an advantage that we can have a lay approach, not necessarily pushing our own. And but so I want to brainstorming. I think it's important. Are we really we support European Union in our project or not? Are really we able? How? By what means, etc. So with this overview, let's have around. I think we could have yes, around the table. And just to discuss freely on this matter. So who starts? Johan and then Angelo, I see.
Well, I think the question is realistic. I'm rather familiar with the work in the US. It's not only Cornell, it's also the National Soil Health Institute, and also USDA has a program. I think what I found very impressive in the presentation was all the field work and all the work closely with the farmers they're doing, which fits right in the living lab concept, I suppose. One thing I would challenge a bit is that it's very soil oriented. And I personally don't believe that should be obvious by now in soil ecosystem services. Soils contribute to interdisciplinary ecosystem services that in turn deliver the SDGs and the Green Deal. Because if in soil science we only talk about soil, that's fine, but then the agronomists do the same, the hydrologists do the same, the economists do the same, and we will not get impact in the field. And that's my big point. So as we talk about these what they do with their test, I think it's great, but I would like to see the link with the soil, with the ecosystem services. And then the earlier question that Jack raised, there are many ecosystem services. Yes, sure. Select the major ones and then show how the soil can contribute. And then again, the healthier the soil, the larger the contribution. If we show that, I think we pay the biggest service to the soil science profession by looking broader than only our own stuff. And I think there are great programs in America. I'm a great fan, but I think this link with the ecosystem services, and then again, think of the CAP, which will award ecosystem services. So we will have to define ways to measure them. We will have to find ways to define thresholds in order to make it operational. So that would be my major comment, and that would fit with what Fabio was saying. What is our major niche? Like Luca was saying, what is our niche? We have to look in what way we are special and not doing what the others are doing. And I think in this way we define a very profitable niche. Yep.
Thank you. There was Angelo, Sarah, and Jack in this order.
So I would like to put the discussion to come back to the question of the scale, because for me it's crucial also for the EU policy. So how define the soil health, in my opinion, should what I understand also from these talkings, that the scale is crucial, because what I understood that maybe for larger scale, the approach that is showed by Vanessa is the very powerful, the empirical one, so we can have a lot of soil properties and we can have a larger view. But for local scale, for me, I have doubt that this work, because soil properties are too general, respect the local needs. I have an example for in north of Italy, the rice is cultivated submerged. So if we have a soil property like the soil water storage capacity, like this, doesn't work in that area, because they produce the rice also on sandy soil after a compaction. So the only information of the sandy soil is not enough to enlighten the soil, the ecosystem services, and the production of that area. So we need to go deeply in each specific area or region, or for what we would like to have this soil health. So it's not an easy task for me, the definition of this. So I would like to open a discussion. What do you think about this problem of the scale and how we can approach the pros and the cons of the two? So it's, I don't know if it was clear my question.
Okay, thank you, Angelo. Let's keep in this direction and we go back to your question. Sarah?
Yes, I think it kind of answers or adds to the comments so far. With Agromix, we had one massive challenge that was actually set up by the funding call of having to work at different scales. Farm, cooperative of farms, or neighbors, or valley, or regional level, and then also national level, European level, and so on. At the same time, we have to be relevant for the specific contexts, which is a bit like asking for two completely different approaches and two completely different works. So, of course, with the Living Labs, we kind of overcame this issue. But what we also found is that because we had to focus on very specific systems like agroforestry and mixed farming, we could use databases, like we have colleagues working on modeling using Lucas databases and so on. But at the same time, we also have to be mindful of what these ecosystem services mean, what indicators are linked to which ecosystem services we want to integrate in our assessment, and which ones are actually relevant for the people we are working with, because otherwise they will just not engage. And that links to one of the key issues of the new strategy, the European strategy, that is effective communication. We have fantastic solutions, but they're not implementing them. Why? Because we struggle to engage with partners who are not academics, who don't really care about publishing papers. They're farmers. So we have to work on a different level. We have to try to, yeah, of course, use science and the findings, but at the same time, try to translate them and be able to communicate effectively. This is why we chose the participatory approach, and a number of elements that the Living Labs themselves will decide to use to address their transition, because they are relevant for them. Now, of course, this is just the first step, and it's only generalizing to a certain, it allows generalization up to a certain extent, of course, but it allows us to effectively engage and potentially implement a transition that is actually working, rather than something that is a bit more general. So this is a bit the compromise we had to address.
Okay, Thank you, Sarah. We have only 15 minutes because we have we want to finish spot on time at 1 o'clock. So, Jack.
Yeah, I had two comments right now. One replying to Johan and the other to Angelo and Sarah. Let me be brief then. If we can learn from China, I think that is that they have the bigger cities, and the soils in their cities are required to perform differently than agricultural soils where we have the focus on in Europe. So the social development goals can be in general the same, but the processes that we look at and the ecosystem service that we require, the stakeholders require, the public, are different. In Chinese cities, the natural attenuation is much more important than production, of course. So the point is that here in Europe, we have strongly focused on agricultural soils, but we also need to focus on urban soils. Sure. That's just a point to make. And then in response to the scale issue, I think that if soil health is the provision of ecosystem services, then one has to look at who is using these services. If you don't look at that, then it's just the potential supply of services. But when doing an economical assessment, you look at the flow of the services. And if that extends on a regional scale or a national scale or a global scale, there's different valuation and different demand for the services. So ecosystem assessment strongly depends on the scale that you're looking at. And don't mix up the agricultural services that are servicing agricultural production only. The stakeholders and the end users and the beneficiaries, they scale up and have different demands depending on scale. And all scales need to be included.
Okay.
That's also a statement that I like to make.
Jack, thank you. Stelios?
Yeah. Well, just a small addition to what Sarah said, because the issue of scale is always present in all European actions. Either it has to do with the soil or with the climate smart agriculture or with smart citizens and others. Something that we are always forgot is that there is also another dimension, the dimension of who we are engaged to the project. Because half of them are academics, half of the other consortium is the other partners are coming from innovative SMEs, so that they are trying to shape a market and produce some new services for the agricultural sector. And always we're engaged some few farmers that they are the champion users. They are not the regular ones, they are the opinion leaders. But we are missing the average farmer, the average user, which actually reflects the reality out there. This is something that we are always missing from the European research projects. And sometimes we are leading to someone, we are taking another way, where the society and the reality asking to turn somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. Stelios, Paloma?
Yes, I would like to say that the initiative for Permilis could be very useful to implement the strategy of and to help with the idea of health soil, because of its conception. It's just an initiative with different colleges and governments, farmers, policymakers, companies, and I think this is important with the support of science. And I think it is very important to have this kind of stakeholders working together to try to get the aim of the initiative and to help to and in fact in the EU strategy the initiative is in in the text, and the Commission is going to join this initiative because he thinks that it could be very useful, and for me the important of the initiative is to join all the stakeholders that could be involved in soil health, and well, just to show that it could. This is the value, the added value of the initiative, to join all the stakeholders in the same objective.
Okay, thank you. I will also comment. I take the occasion from this last contribution by Paloma. I think, of course, CAP and F2F initiative is very important, and please, I will ask to you, but also all to the other colleagues, please send to Catherine and Anka to the mailing list all the information, for instance, to join the initiative, but also the material as soon as Matthias, Jack, etc., Sarah, the material, the app ready, please let us know in order so you could use the mailing list. But let's move to the point that made by you. So I will start. Yes, of course, I fully agree with the Johan ecosystem services approach. Apart from soil, let's generalize. Could be this ecosystem, as I showed in the little attempt to make an overview. There is really a lack on ecosystem services. Everybody quote it, but in terms of quantifying, to have a robust number, not scores, because of course when we end up with scores, everything can be made, but we need a robust approach to evaluate ecosystem services on soil, but also in addition to soil, other things. So this is one thing. It's, I think, very important, because I want to add that even the best decision support system is, if it is based on a very rough estimate, maybe it's better to do not have it sometimes. So we must become operational when we have something which is robust enough for the people. Then the story of scale. I think obviously scale is very important, but we need the metrics. On one side is scale, on the other, user. Because of course, for a spatial planners at maybe the same scale, they work at very detailed scale, but they need a different answer with respect to farmers. So what I want to say that if farmers really needs an approach which is based on their own soil, and there is no map who can tell me the spatial variability of my soil in a specific place. So we need a kind of system adaptive for farmers, while of course for spatial planners who have to plan urban soils is completely different. So what I want to say is scale is an issue. We already know, for instance, in the case of Italy, yes, Francesca is not here, but basically ISPRA produce ecosystem services for the whole Italy. But of course, this evaluation does not work when you take your own farm. So it's a story of scale, but also of expertise and the needs of those expertise, because ecosystem service is not just for farmer, everybody. If you take any municipality plan of a spatial planner, they always speak about ecosystem services. So we have an adapted approach. We need to take into account scale, but also specific domain. So this is very important. So I think we need to, in this interaction, would be useful to gather all the things we are discussing right now, but to produce also some ideas and proposal to the mission, because I'm very much afraid that we stop just with the idea of gathering knowledge, ready-made knowledge. There is this sometimes this vision, we know already everything, which is not the case. If you take the example of aggregate stability I showed to you, which is a benchmark, but when you go on physics, the connection between an aggregate stability and the production, as indirectly shown even by Vanessa in his the spread of his diagram is huge. So of course this is we need further research, and of course we need the living lab and lighthouses. Okay, Johan is here, so this is a question to you, Johan, because there is of course, we need those. I'm still confused the connection between us, scientists, and living lab and lighthouses. Since you were in the board, you could shed a bit of light. But sometimes I'm afraid that there is a bit the naive approach that living labs and lighthouses will solve all our problems. Well, I think there is still a huge problem to be solved on our side. Even look to the variability of approach we were exposed today. So Johan, shed a bit of light, please.
Well, I think that's the key question. And getting back to the earlier question of Angelo and Jack and others about well the scale issue. We do a case study now in Holland. We try to initiate that, saying we have light calcareous clay soils, and we have arable system. Now, what can be done in order to satisfy the various ecosystem services on that particular farm? How should we measure it? How should we judge it? That same soil could be on another type of land use, and that's Angelo's question. When you have rice, flooded rice, it's a different ballgame. You get a different story. So you may get a situation where you talk about the given type of soil, because that is important as a stable point. The weather changes, the hydrology can be changed, the fertilization can be changed, but the soil is the soil. It's there. What are the options you can do there, and then work with the farmer, and you get a very specific case, and you document that. But you have another farm, another living lab on the same soil, also arable farm, that's doing something differently. So document that very clearly, okay, and measure it. And I think that can be done with all the information we have now. And see that these are wicked problems we have that has not been mentioned so far. There's no linear research where you do research and you get one solution. This is what we should do. No, it's scenario type thinking, and there are different possibilities to do that. So I think the key issue, and that is also the strength, I think, of the European approach now, is to focus on individual production units, where a given farmer is standing with his feet in the clay or the sand or whatever it is, and has to make a living. Okay, that's the key point. They work a lot with farmers in the US. I think that's very impressive. But then the data they produce is all averages and frequency curves and everything else, which is fine. But I think our key issue is we have a given farm, we do our bag of tricks, we come with conclusions, say, in this farmer is doing things in this particular farming system, this particular type of soil, where he makes a living, where his water quality is okay, where his production level is okay, where biodiversity is increased, where there is a limited amount of greenhouse gases and biodiversity is okay in the soil and also in the region. And there again, you need a regional context for the biodiversity aspect. If you can document that with hard data, we have one great advantage. I don't know about your country, but we have very negative publicity about agriculture in my country. Publicity was in the press and all that, they just pollute and it's all terrible and all that kind of stuff. I think with these specific examples, we can overcome that, and we have to overcome that as a very important aspect of this whole communication. But you have to have hard data communicated with modern techniques. We've seen all these movies, they're great, but they're very general. They could be more specific to tell our story. That sustainable agriculture is very well possible, and we need the inventiveness of the various farmers to do that. So again, I think the living labs is a key issue we have compared with others, and we should focus on that and take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Amen.
I think, yes, this was a good conclusion. Are there any firing issues? We have the last 2 minutes. I think we cover, yes, Sarah?
just really quickly, in our case, the living labs are actually predominantly farms, but we also have cooperative farms, and we also have a number of living labs who work at regional scale and value chain scale. So we want to check also how to implement a transition to more sustainable system at different levels. And in terms of giving a voice, I fully agree. We try to go a bit beyond the Living Labs network, let's say. So we interview farmers outside of our partners and Living Labs, and the purpose is showcase what you're doing on your farm and how well you're doing it, so that they can engage with other farmers and potentially also snowballing connections and knowledge.
Yep.
Okay, Jack, the last. No, Jack. I saw. Okay, in this case, okay, I think still remember. Jack, sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I said I appreciated this event very much, and if you intend to have a kind of a report from this and submit that to Europe, I think that's a very good idea. I just wonder how you would go about.
No, we promise to produce.
Yeah,
we promise to produce a kind of report because yes, also to have somehow to storytelling this meeting and to deliver to Marta. But we shall share this report before submitting to all of you, and Catherine and Anka will help me in order to have a joint report. And also I will take on board the series of comments we made, even the story of scale, etc. And so we, maybe Living Lab I will quote, but you know, it's already a benchmark. We are not going for the European Commission. So we'll make this report, we shall share, you can comment, integrate, and we can produce the final version to send to Marta, which is the policy officer which joined today. She's DG Agri, but she joined the Soil mission on the side of European Commission, so has a special value for all of us. Okay, so it's spot 1 o'clock. And thank you very much. I appreciate very much. It was really an important meeting because it's a very nice interaction of ideas from you, which represent all these different projects. So let's see whether we are able to create something out from this meeting. And thank you again for the time you devoted and keeping in close contact. And so thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.